Chapter 1991. He didn't know if this was Wamo's idea or someone else's. Several banners appeared among the god, demon, and demon armies of the new era. Huge, gilded characters were engraved on the banners, which fluttered in the wind. It was like something out of a costume drama. Among the armies, a banner with the character Yi hung at the very front. Master of the Stars, Master of the Stars, Master of the Stars. As Ezekiel passed through the armies, the surrounding Great Era experts bowed in greeting. At the forefront of these troops stood their commander-in-chief. These commanders were either great emperors who had once ruled over a region or clan leaders. They stood proudly at the front of the army, their chests puffed out. Above their heads floated their war banners, engraved with either their surnames or their totems. 100,000 soldiers stood in a square formation. The Great Era Alliance had over 100 such formations. On either side of the formation stood an awe-inspiring divine might cannon. Beside each god-powered cannon, there were at least 10 titled martial emperors. Reporting to the Master of the Stars, the Great Era Alliance has assembled. Inshang's expression was solemn. When he saw Yi Zichen nod, he retreated to his side. Of the 4 auxiliary stars, only Su Lu wasn't by his side. In truth, she should be by Yi Zichen's side like the other auxiliary stars. Unfortunately, Empress Su Qingyan and clan head Su Wan had been captured and taken to the god realm. The goddess of life, Su Yan, was in Yale's hands. Su Mei had no desire or interest in managing her clan. This task naturally fell to Su Lu. Yi Zichen looked to the north. He could still see Su Lu, her expression indifferent. She stood in the air, an enormous banner fluttering beside her. Behind her were all the elite forces of a 9-tailed fox clan. Big Sister Lu, really is getting colder and colder. Yi Zichen chuckled. He couldn't help but mutter to himself. Just now, he'd only glanced at her. They were separated by at least a few thousand meters, but he could still feel the coldness emanating from her. Never mind getting close. He couldn't even look at her. He felt as if he'd be frozen solid. Inshang and Emperor Hades nodded in agreement. Go Yuzhan shrugged. This means that Big Sister Lu's glacial breath is becoming more and more exquisite. Sigh, but it's strange. My predecessor has memories of glacial breath. He said that if I want to cultivate glacial breath to its peak, my emotions will be sealed in ice. Although Big Sister he might be a little cold, but he wasn't completely heartless. The rate at which her icy breath is progressing is truly frightening. Yi Zichen chuckled. That's right. On the outside, Su Lu looked like a cold person, but on the inside, she was actually softer than anyone else. A typical person with a sharp tongue, but a soft heart. If one wanted to cultivate ice breath quickly, they needed to freeze one's emotions. Where did feelings come from? It came from the heart. Her heart had been frozen the moment Yuan Hong died in front of her hundreds of years ago. Feelings, to her, it no longer existed. The kindness she occasionally revealed and the gentleness she showed to Su Yin and the others were all part of her rationality, as well as her inner gentleness. As for feelings that came from the heart, it was possible that they were sealed in the 10,000 zhang thick ice. Easy. Fortunately, Emperor Hades elbowed Yi Zichen. If not for that, he might still be lost in his memories of the past. Yi Zichen narrowed his eyes and gently wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes. When he thought of Yuan Hong, he couldn't help himself. Back then, they'd been so close. You don't look too good. How about we wait a few days before launching our all-out attack? We've already waited for so long. 1 or 2 more days won't make a difference, said Emperor Hades worriedly when he noticed Yi Zichen's expression. Inshang and Ahog nodded. They could see that Yi Zichen's expression was terrible. Wait, it's already come to this. Do you really think I can wait? He glanced at Emperor Hades. The instant his gaze met Yi Zichen's, his pupils constricted. His eyes were bloodshot. Furthermore, Emperor Hades could sense Yi Zichen's hidden urgency in the depths of his heart. Day and night, I've done everything in my power to calculate and calculate. I've taken each step carefully and steadily. Wasn't it all for this moment? Wait, I really don't have the patience to wait any longer. Yi Zi, I can understand how you feel, but your current situation. It's nothing. I just recalled some sad memories. Yi Zichen chuckled and gathered his emotions. Then he turned around and flung his cloak behind him. The instant he flung his cloak, a cool breeze appeared in the outside, causing his cloak to flap loudly. He took a few steps forward. Behind him, the Era army watched him as he walked all the way to the crack in the God Realm's barrier. Due to the Era army's deliberate efforts, even the self-healing barrier hadn't fully healed. That wasn't all. The crack was even larger than before. He looked down at the crack. Beneath his feet, the God Realm soldiers had long since readied themselves for battle. Under the command of their commanders, they gazed up at the shattered barrier. They met face to face, then a smile flashed across Yi Zichen's lips. The moment that smile appeared, the commanders and soldiers of the Outerium celestial race couldn't help but shiver. Whenever they closed their eyes, all they could think about was Yi Zichen's smile. Perhaps, even if they died, they would never forget that smile for the rest of their lives. It was a little compassionate, a little playful, and so cold that it chilled their hearts. Before long, Yi Zichen slowly stepped into the barrier. The instant he did, the God Realm soldiers tensed up to 200%. However, he only took one step in, then looked back at the army behind him. He didn't say anything, just glanced at them. Kill! The Era army slaughtered all around them. The instant they moved, Yi Zichen entered the God Realm's territory. The deafening battle cries naturally fell into the ears of the extraterritorial gods. Just like a chain reaction, the outer domain deities who were on standby also roared towards the sky. They swung the weapons in their hands with all their might, and cold lights crisscrossed. For their homeland, for the future, no matter what, they had no choice but to fight. Kill all of the God Realm's troops and the Era armies. Both sides did not hold back at all. It could be said that this was a desperate battle with their backs against the wall. This battle, no matter who won or lost, it would forever be remembered. During this time, Yi Zichen didn't participate in the chaotic battle. From start to finish, his gaze was fixed on the God Realm's tallest tower. Chapter 1992. The true victims of war were always the common people. The Era army had invaded the God Realm, and the Southern God Clan had become the main battlefield, but that didn't mean the other areas were safe. In the short time it took to brew a cup of tea, the flames of war engulfed the entire God Realm. Yi Zichen heard the cries and cries of the ordinary gods. In the past, he would have acted as if he couldn't bear to watch. Unfortunately, he was no longer the Yi Zichen of old. The innocent, they were indeed pitiful. That much was true. Yi Zichen wasn't so cold-blooded as to simply watch them die at the hands of the Era army. On the other hand, he still felt pity and sorrow for the dead. But war was like this. Blood had to flow, and people had to die. It didn't matter if they were innocent or someone who deserved to die. If it wasn't for the fact that the Era had taken the initiative to attack, then this scene might have appeared in the Era. At that time, would Yale be merciful? Absolutely not. The word mercy might not even exist in Yale's mind. He might have gone even further, adding even more spice to the misery. That was Yale. Only a war criminal with nothing but destruction in his heart would do something like this. He was a dangerous guy. If he wanted the Milky Way galaxy to return to its former glory, Yale couldn't stay in this world. So long as he lived, the Milky Way galaxy would never be at peace. Yale! Yi Zichen clenched his fists, ignored the gods' cries and screams, and charged toward the divine palace. He really couldn't take it anymore. He couldn't wait any longer. He had to confirm whether or not those people were still alive. At that moment, Yi Zichen suddenly came to a stop, but inertia pushed him forward 100 meters. He looked around. After a brief examination, Yi Zichen slowly raised his hand and touched the ground. He was stopped. After advancing a few dozen meters, his fingers came into contact with an invisible mirror. He couldn't advance any further. He pressed his hand against the mirror. The force of the collision caused Yi Zichen's hand to bleed, but the mirror wasn't damaged in the slightest. Fortunately, he'd warned him in advance. Given how hard the mirror was, even if he didn't lose his mind, he'd still be stunned for a while. He released his spiritual power. In about 3 breaths, the space was completely filled with spiritual energy. A barrier. It was a very special barrier. Not only could it seal people inside, but it could also seal spiritual power inside, making it impossible to extend one's divine sense outside. I've waited for a long time, Star-Lord Yi. A white-haired old man slowly walked out from the void. Bai Ning. The old man standing before Yi Zichen was the Outlander God race's supreme commander, Bai Ning. Yi Zichen wasn't too surprised to see him. Instead, he glanced at him indifferently. You must be Bai Ning, the commander of the Outworld God clan. It is an honor for Star-Lord Yi to know me. Bai Ning smiled. I didn't know before, but the captive commanders always mentioned you, so it was hard not to know you. They respect you very much, but of course, from their words, it seems they're afraid of you, said Yi Zichen. I know that. They're indeed afraid of me. Bai Ning's confirmation caused Yi Zichen to shrug and smile. He looked the old man up and down. My impression of you has changed. Why do you say that? Bai Ning seemed very interested in Yi Zichen's words. I'd like to know your previous impression of me. To tell you the truth, of course, I thought Yale was a bit stupid. His impression of Bai Ning was that he'd mentioned Yale. This seemed like an irrelevant answer, but Bai Ning didn't interrupt. After our previous encounters, I thought you were an idiot. You could have stayed inside the barrier and wasted our resources, but instead, you sent people to attack us. That's not all, but you deliberately sent people to their deaths. Back then, I thought Yale must have lost his mind. If something went wrong, you'd be the commander. It seems I misjudged you. Bai Ning wasn't angry. Although he hated idiots, he couldn't stand others calling him an idiot. Then what changed your opinion of me? He smiled and looked at the trapped Yi Zichen with interest. He wanted to hear what he had to say. Now, Yi Zichen shrugged and pointed at the barrier around them. You calculated my path. Even if it's inevitable that I'll go looking for Yale, you must be an intelligent person to be able to calculate my path so accurately. Working with those idiots was hard. If it weren't for them, we might not even have met. That's right. Working with them was really hard, said Bai Ning. I can understand. Yi Zichen nodded at Bai Ning, as if he could empathize with him. Then he tapped the barrier. In truth, I really wanted to chat with you a bit longer. I like talking to smart people. Unfortunately, I'm in a hurry. Commander Bai Ning, could you remove the barrier and let me continue forward? Can we just pretend we never met? What do you think? Laughed Bai Ning. It seemed it's not very likely. Yi Zichen scratched his head helplessly, then slapped the barrier a few times. The crisp thumps echoed in his ears. At the same time, he tilted his head and looked at Bai Ning. It seems you're a major expert proficient in the Tao of space. You've mastered the spatial slicing technique to perfection. If you can comprehend it to this extent, you actually have many more options to trap me. Why use this move? Star-Lord Yi, I admit I'm no match for you, so you can only use the spatial slicing technique to move me elsewhere. Yi Zichen finished Bai Ning's sentence for him. His lips curved into a smile. In other words, you're planning on using this move to prevent me from getting close to the Divine Palace? That's what I was thinking, said Bai Ning. In other words, you think you can accurately calculate every route I'll take to get to the Divine Palace? I'll do my best. Interesting. Yi Zichen narrowed his eyes and smiled, then rested his chin on his hand. If this were any other time, I'd really like to play a little game with you. Unfortunately, I've always said I'm in a hurry. Suddenly, Bai Ning's expression froze. He wanted to use the profound mysteries of space to move the spatial slicing technique to another location, only to discover that the barrier around Yi Zichen had already cracked. Then, Chapter 1993, Spatial Slicing. It was a technique that completely separated space and condensed it into a separate subdimension. This sort of subdimension wasn't connected to the real world at all. In order to break free, one had to consider spatial turbulence and turbulence. Simply put, when Yi Zichen was trapped in the subdimension, it was as if he'd been sealed in a mirror. It existed in the real world, yet it was separate. Just now, he'd walked out of the mirror. Some of the subdimension's fragments were still attached to Yi Zichen's robes, and the spatial turbulence around them wreaked havoc on his robes. However, it was precisely this kind of spatial turbulence that caused countless experts to tremble in fear. Yi Zichen simply picked it up then pieced it back together like a jigsaw puzzle. You're pretty good. After that, Yi Zichen looked back at Bai Ning, as if to praise him. Little did he know, when he saw this, Bai Ning's hands trembled. Was this a monster? He'd forcefully broken through the subdimension and walked out of the mirror. He'd ignored the spatial turbulence and even pieced the fragments back together. I'm in a hurry, so I can't chat with you any longer. I hope you can survive this battle. Then we can finish this unstarted game. Yi Zichen pressed his lips into a smile, then walked forward without looking back. Before long, I'm really in a hurry. Yi Zichen, who was walking in front, suddenly stopped and stared fixedly at Bai Ning. Just now, Bai Ning wanted to step forward and stop him, but only for a split second. He hadn't expected Yi Zichen's senses to be so sharp. He'd sensed it in that split second. Bai Ning was the commander of the god race, while Yale was the god emperor of the god race. Bai Ning clearly knew that Yi Zichen's target was the divine palace's Yale. As commander, he had to stop Yi Zichen. This was his responsibility and obligation. Even though he knew that the epic Star Lord was far stronger than he was, and that there was no comparison between them. Everything he'd done had been futile. It was like throwing an egg against a rock. He still had to do it. This is my responsibility as commander. Bai Ning lowered his head, then straightened his chest, and suddenly looked up. Old age had caused his eyes to no longer be clear, but it was these cloudy eyes that were filled with the determination and sharpness of his heart. At that moment, Bai Ning's aura poured out like tide. He did not hold back at all. The instant Yi Zichen broke through the barrier, Bai Ning knew he had to go all out if he wanted to win that tiny sliver of hope. The vast divine power converged into a golden sea. If there were people around, they would definitely be amazed. This was a god-king level deity ocean. God-king, they were the peak existences of the outer realm god race. They looked down on all living beings and controlled the lives and deaths of billions of living beings. When the few god-kings of the celestial race fell one after another, and Yale usurped the position of god emperor, the celestial race didn't have a new god-king to replace them. Bai Ning, he was the first and possibly the only god-king realm expert. The gods from the outer realms and the warriors from the new era couldn't help but cast sidelong glances. No one in the army could compare to this sea of divine power. Bai Ning, who had the strength of a god-king and divine sea, was the commander. Whether it was in terms of strength or intelligence, he was fully deserving of the title. Unfortunately, Bai Ning was not happy at all when he saw the divine, king-divine sea. It was far from enough. He knew exactly what kind of existence stood before him. A god-king? That sounded mighty, but what use was that? You've already wasted too much of my time. Yi Zichen didn't appreciate Bai Ning's golden divine sea too much. Instead, he sighed impatiently. I'm sorry, but in that case, let's end this quickly. I know that god kings are no match for you, but I still hope you'll give it your all. You can actually live, said Yi Zichen. Given my current position, I have no choice. Bai Ning's eyes flashed with a biting cold light. Anyone in the outer realm could surrender, but he couldn't. Anyone in the outer realm could give up, but he couldn't. Anyone in the outer realm could cower, but he couldn't. He was the commander. He was the outer realm god race's last shred of dignity. No matter who was standing in front of him, he could not retreat. Even if he were to die, he had to die on the path of charging, not on the way to escape. He had no choice but to fight to the death. Don't tell me you don't feel nostalgic? Asked Yi Zichen. Nostalgic? Bai Ning's body trembled as the image of a beautiful woman flashed through his mind. No. To his surprise, Bai Ning's expression was steely. He gnashed his teeth and answered Yi Zichen's question with the coldest of words. All right, I'll do my best. Consider it my respect for you. Boom. The scene before Bai Ning's eyes changed. He stood in the middle of the vast Milky Way. The stars shone resplendently, dazzling him with their dazzling brilliance. Unfortunately, this beautiful scene lasted only an instant. He saw the stars explode and turn into black holes. The entire Milky Way was in ruins. Countless black holes devoured everything around them, including Bai Ning, who stood in the middle of the Milky Way. He did his best to resist the black holes. Then, Yi Zichen appeared before him. He was clad in azure dragon robes, and the stars shone upon him. Their radiance was so dazzling that no one dared look him in the eye. With every step he took, the stars of the Milky Way parted for him. Wherever he went, the stars that had already turned into black holes and died of old age would revive again. With a wave of his hand, the Milky Way shone resplendently. As his hand descended, heaven and earth dimmed. He was the king of the Milky Way. He was the origin of all life. He revived the stars. He was the end of fate. He'd led the stars from their former glory to their decline. No star could defy his will. His every word and action was the truth of the Milky Way's operation. Come. Yi Zichen's emotionless words left Bai Ning's lips, but it was as if he'd been immobilized. He stood in place in a daze, unable to attack. Yi Zichen advanced. Bai Ning retreated. As he retreated, Bai Ning questioned himself. What was wrong with him? He'd already made up his mind. Even if he died, he couldn't retreat. Why was it that his body refused to listen to him? Suddenly, a beautiful figure flashed across his sea of consciousness. I lost. Bai Ning collapsed to the ground, his face filled with disappointment. He'd lost. Although he didn't know how he'd lost, he knew full well that he couldn't raise a weapon against Yi Zichen. Chapter 1994. He sat on the ground in a daze. His clothes were drenched in sweat. Even now, Bai Ning didn't know what he was afraid of, but he couldn't muster up the courage to stand against Yi Zichen. Her silhouette lingered in his mind, and her bell-like laughter echoed in his ears. Do you need me to help you out? A gentle voice whispered into his ear. When he looked up, he was greeted by a smile as warm as a spring breeze. Just what kind of person was this? A second ago, his aura was unstoppable, but in the next, he restrained it like a neighbor's boy. This kind of unrestrained aura. He'd fought for so many years, but this was the first time Bai Ning had surrendered without even the courage to face his opponent head-on. This was also the first time he'd lost a battle. He took a deep breath. Who could always be a victorious general? After comforting himself, Bai Ning simply extended his hands, and the restriction around the deity, Si, was completely dispersed by him. He was already prepared to become a captive, or at least offer up his life. What are you doing? Yi Zichen couldn't help but frown when he saw Bai Ning's situation. To the outsiders, the divine Si was even more important than a godhead. It contained the divine power they'd accumulated over their entire lives, and the power of their godheads came from the divine Si. If something went wrong with the divine Si, even a godhead wouldn't help. Just like Yale back then, his divine Si had been sealed by Elder Lin, and his godhead had dimmed. He'd once been insufferably arrogant, but while his divine Si was sealed, he could only remain in the divine palace like an ordinary person. At that time, even if he was a superior deity, he would be able to easily deal with him. As a result, the divine Si's importance went without saying. The other gods didn't have enough time to protect it, but Bai Ning had dispelled all his defenses, completely exposing himself to Yi Zichen. You win. You can do whatever you want to me. Bai Ning didn't waste words. He was a defeated general. No matter how Yi Zichen treated him, no matter why he'd retreated, he had to maintain his integrity. He couldn't possibly be that sort of bootlicker. He had to wag his tail at Yi Zichen. He was a general. He was the commander of the outsiders. Even if it was shameful to retreat without a fight, it was his last dignity to die with pride. Hey, did I forget what I just said? I'm in a hurry. Yi Zichen shrugged helplessly, then looked Bai Ning up and down. Then he formed a series of hand seals in the air, causing a cage of flames to descend from the sky and cover Bai Ning's head. Sealing your divine sense Si is too much of a waste of time. Just stay here. Bai Ning stretched out his palm. When he touched the flames of the cage, he didn't feel any burning at all. That wasn't all. Perhaps due to Yi Zichen's carelessness, the cage was full of holes. It might be able to trap a higher god, but it was impossible to trap Bai Ning. Bai Ning was puzzled by this arrangement. You think this can trap me? I think so. Yi Zichen nodded non-committally, then gently tapped the flame cage. This is a barrier that I painstakingly created. It shouldn't be a problem to seal you, right? Painstaking effort? Bai Ning truly doubted how Yi Zichen had the nerve to say that. This sort of cage. Isn't it better to just sit here and relax? You don't need to associate with those idiots. You don't need to feel any psychological burden at all. You care about the god race, but unfortunately, you're trapped. You're a smart person, so I trust you know what to do. As soon as Zichen finished speaking, Bai Ning couldn't help but tremble. He didn't respond. Instead, he watched as Zichen took out a pack of cigarettes and tossed them into the cage. Leave or stay, it's up to you. I trust you'll make the most logical decision. I just hope you won't stop me. I'm in a hurry. Don't always think about dying. Not everyone who dies in battle is a hero, and that's the same for prisoners of war. They don't have to be despised by others. Think about your daughter. I'll say it again. You're a smart person. The decision is up to you. Yi Zichen didn't say anything else, nor did he try to stabilize the cage. He simply transformed into a beam of light and disappeared from Bai Ning's sight. Bai Ning watched as Yi Zichen soared into the sky. This time, Bai Ning didn't try to stop Yi Zichen. He simply stared blankly ahead until Yi Zichen disappeared into the horizon. Only then did he come to his senses and look at the cage around him. Yi Zichen had taken good care of him. It was a full 100 square meters of space, more than enough for him to move about freely. The cage was surrounded by raging flames. From a distance, it looked terrifying, but unfortunately, the flames weren't the slightest bit lethal. At least, to Bai Ning, the flames were a bit too gentle. He glanced at the flames, which were completely harmless to him, then at the cigarettes at his feet. If he wanted to, in a situation where the divine sense, see, was not sealed, he broke through this layer of flame cage. All he needed was a few seconds, or rather, a few seconds was too slow. So long as he wanted to, he could shatter the cage and regain his freedom in the blink of an eye. This cage was far too shabby. Whether it was in terms of structure or stability, it was so bad that Bai Ning wondered if Yi Zichen had done it on purpose to save energy. It was just a simple cage. Bai Ning could break the seal with a flick of his finger if he wanted to. But he didn't. He smiled silently, then leaned against a rock and sat down. Without anyone's guidance, he tossed the cigarettes into his mouth and lit them in the cage's flames. He slowly exhaled a puff of smoke, then gazed silently at the setting sun. He couldn't help but think back to what the old god emperor had said to him. The epic Star Lord really was a special fellow. Chaos? He didn't want to pay any more attention to it. He hadn't been willing to sit in the commander's seat in the first place, and those idiots had left him in a terrible mess. His chances of turning the tables had been ruined. What else could he do? Even the cleverest housewife couldn't cook without rice. Even if Bai Ning had countless schemes, the epic Star Lord's strength was already enough to completely crush the god race's current soldiers. Schemes? What was the use of schemes when absolute strength was superior? What's more, as the commander, he wasn't purposely slacking off and ignoring the god race's situation. He'd been sealed by the epic Star Lord. The epic Star Lord hadn't taken his life. Instead, he'd sealed him in this cage of flames. No matter how worried he was about the god race, there was nothing he could do. Bai Ning felt a rare sense of relief. He simply lay down on the rock. Chapter 1995. Divine Palace. The tallest tower of the god race. Divine Emperor Yale was currently in this tower. Outside the tower, intelligence personnel continuously rushed to this place. In just 4 hours, the battle reports here had already piled up like a mountain. Outside the tower, the personnel of the Divine Palace were dealing with the reports. Battle reports piled up one after another, causing the eyebrows of the Divine Palace personnel in charge of handling the battle reports to gradually turn solemn. Not a single piece of news was a victory. More importantly, the backbone of the commanders, Bai Ning, was nowhere to be found. Because of his disappearance, the commanders, who didn't know how to deal with the situation, sent the reports to the Divine Palace. They wanted God Emperor Yale to make a decision. Lord, it's only been 4 hours, but the southern part of the god race has fallen. Ji Yuan is very aggressive, especially their god-powered cannons. We can't defend against them. The god's people are panicking. The commanders don't know how to deal with them. Outside the Divine Palace, the god who was checking the reports whispered to the man with his hands clasped behind his back. Is there any news from Bai Ning? There's no news from Commander-in-Chief by. Hearing this, the god shook his head. The man also shook his hand. What was Bai Ning doing? He suddenly disappeared at this time and put all the blame on me. Lord, I think we need to inform Lord Yale. The god frowned. He wouldn't have known if he hadn't read the reports, but after reading them, he knew how terrible the situation of the god race was. If this continued, in less than 3 days, the Outer Realm god race would fall completely. Actually, they weren't too worried. Until now, their god Emperor Yale hadn't really made a move. Moreover, most of the god race's troops were outside invading. Even if they fell, as long as they returned, they could still fight back. What they cared about was the people's resentment. The god race was at a critical juncture of life and death. No matter what, God Emperor Yale should show his face, at least to calm the troops. Ji Yuan's attack is very fierce. If this situation continues, it's only a matter of time before the god race falls. At this time, what we need the most is for Lord Yale to come out and stabilize the morale of the army. My lord, only you can meet Lord Yale directly. Please. The man sighed deeply, looking at the mountain of battle reports in front of him, and listening to the endless artillery fire and killing in the surroundings. Yi Zichen felt a chill run down his spine. He was inexplicably suspicious. Did he really make the right decision? Songan, the patriarch of the Song clan. The Song family used to be glorious, but the later generations were incompetent and gradually declined. In order to restore the family's former glory, Songa became Yale's most obedient dog. No matter if he wanted to usurp the throne or destroy other planes, the Song clan would support him wholeheartedly. He's Songan. He became the most popular person around Yale. He was the only emissary in the entire Outerium god race who could speak to Yale directly. This was an honor that countless people envied. At first, Songan also felt that he was very honored. Being able to converse with Divine Emperor Yale was the most direct proof of one's identity and status. But after a long time, he realized that this was an unspeakably bitter task. Bai Ning and Yale sandwiched him in the middle and were in a dilemma. He only looked impressive on the surface, but in reality, he was more sullen than anyone else. Then, he thought about what the Song clan had obtained by sacrificing so much. It seemed like he really didn't get anything. Now was a time of war. Everyone was in a constant state of fear. The only advantage the Song clan had in this chaotic world was that they were Yale's trusted subordinates. When others saw the Song clan, they would smile, but that smile was full of hypocrisy. They even talked behind their backs. Look, Yale's lackey. As for other substantial things, none. Yale didn't give any rewards to the Song clan. In contrast, the Song clan had sacrificed tens of thousands of clansmen to satisfy Yale's ambition. This was actually not the result that Songan wanted. He wanted to climb up to a higher branch. The other clans would give the Song clan some face on account of Yale, and the Song clan would take this opportunity to develop bit by bit. In the end, he climbed up to the usurping Yale. Even though he succeeded, he became a divine emperor. The Song clan could be said to be the greatest contributor to Yale's success in usurping the throne. Logically speaking, they should have been richly rewarded. Unfortunately, what Yale wanted was not the Protoss, but the entire world. The Song clan didn't even get a word of praise. Was I wrong? Songan exhaled deeply and immediately noticed the gazes of the gods around him. I got it. He dragged his tired body into the divine palace. This was his privilege. Only he could enter and leave the palace at will. But every step he took seemed to weigh 1,000 kilograms. Looking for Yale? It wasn't like he hadn't looked for him before. My lord, shut up. I didn't tell you not to bother me. Just as he reached Yale's door, Songan spoke. A gale of divine power appeared inside the room like a tsunami, blowing Songan back several steps. The Protoss are about to fall. Ji Yuan's attack is too ruthless. Our people can't hold on at all. Now we need you to stabilize our morale. Whoosh! Suddenly, a shadow appeared outside the door. When the shadow solidified, the person who appeared in front of Song and was Divine Emperor Yale. My Lord Yale, this emperor seems to have told you more than once not to disturb me. If you do, I'll take your life. Do you think this emperor is joking with you? Yale's expression was cold. The aura he released caused the surrounding temperature to plummet. That chilling feeling spread throughout his body. Song couldn't help but take a few steps back and kneel on the ground. "My lord, this subordinate is also concerned about the Protoss, your family, right?" Yale patted Song's head twice. "This emperor likes obedient people. The reason you're standing here is because of your obedience. Considering that you've worked for this emperor, I'll give you one last chance." "Yes." Sweat dripped from Song's forehead onto the ground. At that moment, he really felt the approach of death. Yale, he really wanted to kill him. "Don't bother me with the Protoss situation. Whether they fall or not has nothing to do with me. If they're defeated, I can only say that those gods don't deserve to live in the country I want to build." Chapter 1996. Song, who was sitting on the ground, didn't get up for a long time. It wasn't that Yale had thrown him hard. Although Yale had thrown him hard, Song was still a master at the level of the main god. He still had the ability to resist a blow. It wasn't his body that hurt. It was his heart. Just now, when Yale grabbed his chin and their eyes met, Yi Zichen's expression changed. Regret surged in his heart like a tide. It wasn't wrong to express goodwill to Yale for the Song Enterprise. For the Song Enterprise, he was willing to be a dog that wagged its tail. But look outside the Divine Palace. There were explosions caused by the collision of divine powers and deafening killings everywhere. The sky was red. It was dyed red with blood. The gods couldn't get the security they deserved, and the gods' warriors were no match for the fierceness of the era and kept retreating. The Protoss. It was about to be gone. It was the Shan Huang of the Protoss. But he didn't care about any of this at all, and he said heart-chilling words without any human feelings. What did he do? He led the Song clan to assist a cruel emperor. He plunged the entire Protoss into misery and suffering. If the Protoss was destroyed, then he, Song, would be a treacherous sinner. Song knelt in the corridor with his head in his hands. He didn't know that if Yale knew what he was thinking, he would definitely scoff at it. Indeed, Song had done something for him. But those things didn't affect the overall situation at all. Even if Song didn't do it, Yale could find someone else to do it. Assist? Not to mention, he could usurp the position of the Shan Huang entirely by his own ability. The Song clan, a small family that didn't even have a main god, could provide Yale with no help. He kept Song, and because he felt that it was more comfortable to use such an obedient person. If he didn't feel comfortable, Yale could abandon Song at any time. Then he could find a new Song, and there were many people who wanted to serve the Shan Huang. To Yale, Song was merely an interlude that couldn't be any more insignificant. Song was unlucky. It just so happened that Yale was in a terrible mood, and Song kept nagging outside like he was chanting scriptures. Yale simply found an excuse to vent his anger. In fact, it didn't matter even if there was no reason. He was Yale, an extraterritorial god race, divine emperor. No matter who they were angry at, they could only endure it. After entering the secret chamber, Yale walked to a bench and looked at the curtain in front of the bench as he muttered to himself, "I've really underestimated that little fellow. He actually brought his defeated troops to fight his way here." The scene on the curtain was divided into 9 parts. Just like the surveillance cameras in the modern world, the images that appeared were the scenes of war outside. The others thought that Yale knew nothing about what was happening outside, but little did they know that everything was under his control. "Bai Ning, oh Bai Ning, you really hurt my heart." His gaze shifted to one of the images. Bai Ning had given up resisting and was lying in the cage, looking up at the sky. "I trusted you so much, but in the end, you treated the mission I gave you like this." Although he said that, Yale did not show any anger, and there was even a slight smile on his face. His finger kept tapping on the image on the curtain, zooming in and out of a certain spot. He witnessed with his own eyes that the extraterrestrial god clan was gradually invaded by the experts of the new era. So many people with unstable auras have suddenly appeared. It looks like they've recently increased their realm through medicine. This canon is a little interesting. Does it need a human as a carrier to transfer energy to it? Yale muttered to himself as he looked at the situation on the screen. It was as if he was there himself. Then he clicked on an image. There was no battle in this image. There was only a person shuttling through the void, quickly approaching the divine palace. He's in too much of a hurry. Sighing silently, Yale turned off the image. Looks like I'll have to speed up the process. Although he said that, Yale felt a headache at the moment. He still couldn't get Qinglan's darkness godhead. Just as Qinglan had said, he had already refined the darkness godhead to the extreme. It would take a lot of effort to forcibly remove it, but there was nothing he could do about it. He needed the power of the darkness godhead. Only by fusing with the darkness godhead could Yale's plan be implemented. After that, he still needed to fuse with the life godhead. Yale didn't need this kind of auxiliary godhead so urgently. It didn't matter when he took it off and fused with it, as long as the darkness godhead could belong to him. Fortunately, his efforts during this period didn't go to waste. No matter how strong Qinglan's willpower was, it was hard for him to maintain peak condition under constant high-intensity torture. Just as Yale left the secret room to teach Song and a lesson, Qinglan was already unconscious. At this rate, it wouldn't be long before he completely lost consciousness. At that time, the darkness godhead would naturally belong to him, Yale. He gently pushed forward. In this secret room, another door leading to another secret room opened. My old friend, what's the point of your persistence? I said that no one could stop me. Why don't you believe me? Yale spread his hands and walked toward the chair with its back facing him. The person tied to the chair with divine power was Qinglan. During this period, Yale had been exhausting his mental and physical strength to extract his divine spark. Old friend? Had he finally completely lost his willpower? Thinking of this, Yale's eyes instantly lit up. He had been waiting for this moment for too long. Old friend? Don't think you can fool me with such a small trick. Do you still want to try and fight back against me? Yale's eyes were fixed on the throne as he slowly approached it. He really had lost consciousness. When Yale completely walked in front of Qinglan, he saw that Qinglan had already closed his eyes. The crack between his eyebrows released the power of the darkness godhead, and it wasn't as strong as before. Old friend, no matter how you resist, you can't escape fate. His fingers carefully released divine power and slowly cut open the crack between Qinglan's eyebrows. The rhombus-shaped darkness godhead gradually revealed its full appearance. The obscure and evil power that lingered around the godhead made Yale's hands tremble slightly. The darkness godhead was about to be in his hands. The godhead that he had once personally condensed was finally going to return to his side. Goodbye, old friend. No one in this world can stop me anymore. Without any hesitation, Yale's hand directly reached for the godhead between Qinglan's eyebrows. The moment his fingers touched the godhead, whether it was the godhead, Qinglan, or everything in the room, everything turned into a golden chessboard. Chapter 1997. Darkness Godhood. At that time, it was less than a centimeter away from Yale's hand. As long as he could fuse with the darkness godhood, he would be able to ignore any living beings in this Milky Way galaxy, even if they appeared from other galaxies. Just a little more. His blueprint would be completely laid out. In order to stabilize his emotions, Yale really took a long time. He was about to succeed, but was suddenly intercepted. How could he easily stabilize such a huge psychological upheaval? That was self-mockery, as well as mockery of this ignorant fellow who trapped him. Yale was someone who had seen great storms and waves, after all. After stabilizing his fluctuating emotions, he began to deliberately size up the space he was in. It was completely golden. Under his feet was a chessboard. He could only sense the subtle heaven and earth Tao here, and it was more like an independent space. Is this the demon race's demon emperor, East Monarch Tai? Yale stepped on the chessboard, his hand lightly moving the edges of the chessboard. When his hand touched the edges, water-like ripples would appear. As soon as he finished speaking, a completely golden person appeared on the chessboard, sitting cross-legged on the chessboard. God Emperor Yale, you actually know me. I was quite curious about the death of joy and freedom, so I reversed time to look at the situation at that time. Freedom was trapped in this golden chessboard by you until his death. That wisp of his soul could not return to his body and directly dissipated into thin air. Yale's reply seemed very nonchalant, but his words revealed a very important point. He reversed the river of time. The Tao of time was the easiest Tao to comprehend, but also the most difficult Tao to comprehend. It was simple in that most people could use the profound meaning of time to accelerate time. Reversing the river of time required turning back time. This was the most profound of the Tao of time. Yale had just mentioned this, which meant that he had a very high understanding of the Tao of time. Actually, I've always been curious. Is freedom really dead? Yale said, "Why are you asking me?" The golden man on the chessboard did not raise his head or open his mouth. What does his life and death have to do with me? I'm just curious. When the freedom divine king died, a wisp of his soul was still trapped here with you. As long as the soul is present, he is not dead. I didn't see that wisp of his soul dissipate with my own eyes. Of course, I wanted to see if he could tell me the truth. If he is still alive, where is he now? Are you interested in his divine spark? I'm interested. You did not hide it. Devouring and fusing with a divine spark might have been shocking news to the outside world, but since Don Wang Tai had come knocking on his door, it proved that he already knew about this news. Yale knew very well that this golden person was not East Monarch Tai's body. Yale knew very well that this golden person was not East Monarch Tai. His true body was hidden somewhere on the chessboard. The heaven and earth structure of this chessboard was also very special. If one wanted to forcefully break it, they would only be transferring energy to the chessboard. Yale's was, as he said then saint. Yale was chatting here in order to find traces of Dong Wang. Yang Saint is God, Goddess Long is Tao, sacred as was heaven and the God, Tao as Saint God King Goddess he was able as he God. As the God, Goddess he God. If he recovered later, it would be troublesome to retrieve it. The Era Emperor Star was also rushing towards him. Even if it did not contain the darkness godhood, Yale was confident that he could suppress it. However, he wanted to see Yi Zichen witness the fusion of his darkness godhead even more. His eyes were filled with despair. Of course, it would be better if he could obtain the Freedom God Monarch's godhead, but didn't he self-destruct when he fought with Pleasure God Monarch? He really didn't understand why Eastern Emperor Tai would say something like that. You're too greedy. This isn't greed. This is just the desire to become stronger. Yale's divine sense carefully inspected everything on this chessboard. He was afraid that if he missed a drop of water, he would miss Eastern Emperor Tai. If others knew the method to contain godhood, they might do it. This one is even worse. That's not wrong either, said the Dongwang Tai. Of course that's right. This emperor is not a war criminal who only knows how to invade in your eyes. This emperor's thoughts have always been very clear, and I've always been moving toward the goal. Yale's eyes were locked as he adjusted his divine power to wander around the chessboard. Just now, he seemed to have locked onto a spot suspected to be Eastern Emperor Tai's. Now, he was using his divine sense to investigate it. Invading is to keep the elites. Only elites deserve the right to possess multiple godheads. Once I fuse with the darkness godhead, I'll spread this technique everywhere. I'll make the God race and the entire Milky Way galaxy a power no one dares underestimate. Not long ago, the old God Emperor and the others were worried about the outsiders. If I succeed, that will no longer be a problem. Strange. Something didn't seem right. Despite Yale's impassioned speech, his mind was multitasking as he examined the spot he'd just discovered. It was a water droplet. The way this water droplet split up was very strange, and Yale immediately noticed it. After examining it several times, Yale confirmed that there was definitely something wrong with this water droplet. However, it didn't seem to be Eastern Emperor Tai. When he reversed the flow of time, he saw that Eastern Emperor Tai's 5 elements were metal and fire, while the water droplet just now was wood and water. Lord Yale, you really are ambitious. Eastern Emperor Tai sighed. Lord Yale, are you a little impatient? Just now, you seem to have been using your divine sense to search for my position. I might have found it. Yale's eyes narrowed, and he no longer hesitated too much. His palms suddenly slammed down on the chessboard. Impressively, it was the position where he had just checked the water droplet. Yale's palm could be said to be very heavy. He didn't want to waste too much time with Eastern Emperor Tai. He wanted to use this palm to directly make Eastern Emperor Tai scatter the chessboard. Go, and fuse with the godhead. Seal. Suddenly, a dull shout came from the chessboard. Immediately, countless vines climbed up from the chessboard under Yale's feet, binding his whole body. In an instant, the chessboard also turned into a swamp, and the vines dragged Yale down. In the blink of an eye, the swamp had submerged Yale's neck. This kind of camouflage is only used to deceive children. Don't you think it's too low level for this emperor? Yale raised his hand and pulled. The vines under his feet and the swamp under his feet disappeared, and he was still standing in his original position. Chapter 1998. The golden chessboard was as calm as the surface of water. Not long after Yale finished speaking, ripples appeared in the corner. A middle-aged man with a scar on his face appeared inside the chessboard. His eyes were like the sea of stars, but they were full of vicissitudes of life. His lips were thin and not particularly rosy, and messy stubble grew around them. He wore the most ordinary cotton shirt, cotton pants, and hemp rope shoes. His waist was lightly tied with a hemp rope. Even so, it still couldn't hide his sharpness. Even if he walked in a crowd, he would still be noticed by others. This was his inner temperament. It didn't need to be set off by clothes. You can't be East Emperor Tai. After looking at the man for a while, Yale made this judgment with certainty. The man didn't speak. He tilted his neck and scratched his back as if he was scratching an itch. This went on for at least half a minute before the man retracted his hand. He looked at where his index finger and thumb were pinched. Flames suddenly appeared on his fingertips. How dare you bite me? Flames. Seeing the flames in the man's hand, Yale's eyes narrowed slightly. Just now, he saw the man turn into a water droplet of wood-water. Just now, the vines and swamp were water and wood. Now, he released flames. Hey, you're pretty smart. You know I'm not East Emperor Tai. That's true. How could I be East Emperor Tai? He's so ugly. The man in rough clothes suddenly spoke. From his words, it was clear that he was responding to Yale's words. But his reply was a bit too slow. Yale didn't know how many things other than what he said. Ahem. Inside the chessboard, East Emperor Tai coughed and didn't say anything else. He probably didn't want to argue with the man in rough clothes too much. Yale didn't say anything either. His eyes were still looking at the man in rough clothes. Even though I know I'm very attractive, but sorry, I don't like men. And I already have a wife. If they find out that I'm fooling around outside, I'll die. The way the man in rough clothes spoke, his words, his tone, and his body movements were all very pleasing. Especially when he spoke, the subtle changes on his face vividly displayed the emotions on his face. You're an interesting person. Yale looked at the coarse-clothed man and said, This emperor has an old friend. If he was still alive, he would definitely like you. Old friend referred to the God King of Pleasure. God Monarch Pleasure liked interesting souls, and Yale felt that this man in coarse clothes was one of them. May I ask if your old friend is a man or a woman? Male. No. It's better if he doesn't like me. If it's a girl, a foolish smile flashed across the man's face. A few seconds later, the beautiful scene in his mind turned into two fiendish female yikshaws chasing after him with pitchforks. For a moment, the man in rough clothes trembled. He shook his head forcefully. It was better not to think about this kind of unpleasant scene. It would affect one's mood too much. He had to get rid of this image. Shaking his head until he was a little dizzy, the man nodded in satisfaction. Not long after, the scene appeared again. Heavens, are you demons? The man in rough clothes and the chessboard acted as though he was performing a monologue. At first, Yale found it quite interesting, but then he began to suspect that this man had some mental problems. This kind of nonsense, it was indeed hard for others to accept. Is this friend of yours always like this? He's not really my friend. I don't have much contact with him. Dong Wang Tai said, but he was like this in the past, just not as serious as now. Perhaps he misses his wife too much. Please understand. Is that so? After being messed around by the man in rough clothes, Yale seemed to have forgotten about the darkness godhood waiting for him outside. He watched with great interest as the man in rough clothes played around. One moment he was begging for his wife to spare him, and the next moment he was shouting that they were demons. He was having fun. At the very least, the chessboard was very lively for the past few minutes. At this moment, is it nice? The man in rough clothes, who was acting as though he was being chased by his wife a second ago, calmed himself down in the next second and looked at Yale with bright eyes. Not bad. Yale shrugged. That's good news. As he spoke, the man in rough clothes stretched out his hand and placed it on Yale's chest. Yale could feel that this man was not hostile towards him. At the very least, he did not have any hostility when he stretched out his hand. What are you doing? Tipping me money. If it's nice, shouldn't I give you money? Do you think I'm watching it for free? The man stretched out his hand as though he was waiting for Yale to give him money. Money? It was a strange word to Yale. It was not that he did not know what money was. It was that he had never carried any money on him. If he liked something, he would just snatch it. No one dared to collect money from him when he went to that shop. As a result, for the past tens of thousands of years, he did not carry a single cent on him. What? Look at how smooth you are. Don't you have any money in your pocket? As he spoke, the man in rough clothes stretched his hand towards Yale's chest. Yale's eyes suddenly darkened, and his palm pressed on the man's shoulder. Hey, why are you hitting me? The man in rough clothes, who was pushed back tens of meters, glared at him. Yale did not know why, but he actually felt somewhat embarrassed. The man in rough clothes did not hurt him. He just wanted some money. He did not give him money, and yet he hit him, no. Why was he apologizing to them? This man in rough clothes and Dong Wang Tai were in cahoots. He wanted to get out of the chessboard, not to watch them make a fool of themselves. Hee. Suddenly, the man in rough clothes pursed his lips and smiled. You noticed it quite quickly. In the past, I could even trap Dong Wang Tai for 10 days to half a month with my mist illusion. The God Race's God Emperor does have some skills. Unfortunately, you are still too slow. Rumble. Countless gravel suddenly appeared around Yale's body. These gravel directly buried him within the chessboard, finally forming the shape of a pyramid. So simple. The man in rough clothes, who had a relaxed expression, suddenly froze. He turned his head and saw that his pyramid was already full of cracks. Not long later, bang, gravel flew everywhere. The man lightly snapped his fingers, and a layer of sand wall appeared around him, blocking the gravel outside. Looking at Yale walking out of the pyramid, a smile gradually flashed in his eyes. Yale, who walked out from under the gravel, had the same expression. He looked at the man in rough clothes standing in front of him. I know who you are. Chapter 1999. The Golden Chessboard. Yale, who walked out of the pyramid, used his divine power to shake off the dust on his robe. His eyes blazed like torches as he stared intently at the somewhat deranged man. When Yale was trapped by the pyramid, he completely understood what kind of Tao technique this person was using. The 5 elements. Outside of the God realm, only the 5 elements Great Emperor was famous for his use of the 5 elements. It was impossible for Yale not to have heard of such a heroic figure. Unfortunately, just as he was about to befriend the 5 elements Great Emperor, he received word that the Great Era had already fallen. Not long ago, when the shamans attacked the God realm, he was still sealed in the Divine Sea. His subordinates had told him that the 5 elements Great Emperor had appeared in the God realm, but he hadn't believed them. Now, the moment Yale walked out, the sand and stone that had formed the pyramid transformed into strands of elemental energy that burrowed into the man's back. How could he be so close to the elements? How could he not be the 5 elements Great Emperor? Hey, you saw through me so quickly? The man laughed. From his reply, it was clear that he acknowledged his identity as the 5 elements Great Emperor. It really is the 5 elements Great Emperor. His long-cherished wish of many years had finally come true. He'd once wanted to meet the 5 elements Great Emperor, but couldn't. Now that the 5 elements Great Emperor had appeared before him, he'd fulfilled one of his wishes. Yale looked up and laughed, then took 2 steps forward. I've long since heard of your name in the God realm, and I've always wanted to meet you. Today, I've finally fulfilled my long-cherished wish. I'm delighted. How delighted? The 5 elements Great Emperor tilted his head, his expression serious. When Yale heard this, he froze. It was clearly a polite greeting. How could he ask it like that? Why were all the people of the First Era like this? Neither Yi Zichen nor the Five Elements' great emperor liked to play by the rules. Their words and actions were always strange and incomprehensible. I'm delighted, I guess. Yale forced a smile onto his face as he replied. The Five Elements' great emperor shrugged in response. Even if you're my fan, I can only apologize. Aside from my two wives, I won't give way to anyone else. The scene on the chessboard suddenly changed. The chessboard beneath Yale's feet turned into a torrential river. The turbulent waves fell from the sky and slammed into his body. The huge impact of the water made it difficult for Yale to stand firmly in the river. Not only that, turbulence overflowed under Yale's feet, and there was nothing he could use as a foothold. See burial. The waves came from all directions. The surging waves came one after another, each higher than the last. When the waves arrived in front of Yale, they were already 1,000 feet tall. Yale, who was in the turbulence, felt like he was in an ancient well. They were surrounded by walls of waves, and the only thing they could see was the mouth of the well above their heads, which was getting smaller and smaller, until it was completely devoured. It's quite interesting. He tapped the ground lightly with the tip of his foot, and the chessboard returned to its original tranquility. It was still a golden chessboard, and Yale was still standing on the crisscrossing grid. He didn't even move a single step in the turbulent sea burial. No matter how fierce the aura is, it's just an illusion. What do you think a pitiful illusion like this can do to me? In the blink of an eye, a deep blue light appeared beneath the Five Elements' great emperor's feet. A string of incomprehensible runes began to appear in the circle of light that he had intersected, and they converged to form a complete pattern. Sextet. The ground beneath Yale's feet began to crack. Countless broken stones of the same size were placed around Yale like an 8-formation diagram, covering a distance of several hundred meters. Then, a scepter appeared in the Five Elements' great emperor's hand. The scepter tapped the ground lightly. The stones around Yale instantly glowed brightly. In the void 100 meters away, several red shadows appeared abruptly. These shadows intertwined with the brilliance released by the stones. It condensed into a cage of splendor. Yale. He was trapped in this cage. His eyes were tightly shut. Did he look down on illusions? Standing outside the cage, the Five Elements' great emperor stared indifferently at Yale, who was inside. When Yale revealed his disdain for illusions, the Five Elements' great emperor decided to teach him an unforgettable lesson. Sextet. This was an illusion Taoist technique the Five Elements' great emperor had developed recently. However, there was something special about it. It was both an illusion and a reality. For ordinary illusions, as long as you had a firm belief in them, they would naturally fall apart on their own. Even if you could pass off the fake as the real thing, as long as you had a firm will, it would be very difficult to trap you. This was also the reason why people with high realms would despise illusion techniques. They viewed them as useless. Anyone who could become an emperor was someone with a firm will. Without a resolute and eternal heart, they would never have reached their current realm. Illusions naturally weren't particularly effective against those at the emperor level and above. Even the nine-tailed foxes, who were skilled in illusions, spent less time cultivating illusions when their clansmen reached the diviner realm. Instead, they focused more on comprehending the Tao of the heavens and earth. And yet, the Five Elements' great emperor loved to learn these things. His two wives happened to be the Fox matriarch and clan head. With the support of the Fox clan's database and the teachings of his two wives, his illusions had reached an extremely high level. He was even better than Empress Su Qingyan and clan head Su Wan-er. He'd used illusions to trick the Eastern Emperor Tai and Demon Emperor Kuei Lin. He'd trapped the emperors of the Divine Mountains and refused to let them out. This was the Five Elements' great emperor's handiwork. It was the same illusion he'd just used on Yale. Sextet. The biggest difference between this illusion and other illusions was that it was real. Everything he saw within the illusion was real. If he tried to deal with the sextet using other illusions, there was a high chance he'd be swallowed up by the illusion. 6. 6 things in total. He dug out the 6 things he feared the most from his reincarnation and magnified them countless times over. Although this was his first time using it, the 5 Elements Great Emperor didn't know what kind of person could escape such an illusion. It's over. At that moment, a robed, middle-aged man stepped out of the chessboard. How could it be over? He's a god emperor. The sextet should be enough for him to play around with for a while. We should have enough time to wait for Yi Zichen to return and send that person away with the darkness godhead. It's been hard on me. I've been working for you all this time. I really want to hurry up and go see my wives. They're definitely missing me. As the 5 Elements Great Emperor stretched lazily, a pair of hands suddenly appeared on his shoulders. Chapter 2000. What was going on? The sextet of illusions in the chessboard was intact. When Yale had been trapped, the 5 Elements Great Emperor had been sure that the illusion had sealed him inside. No matter what, it was impossible for him to break free so easily. The 5 Elements Great Emperor estimated that the sextet illusion could trap him for at least an hour. After all, the sextet illusion targeted the deepest fear in the victim's heart. This wasn't to say that the illusion created fear on its own. Rather, the fear in the victim's heart was magnified limitlessly, making it impossible for the victim to face it directly. Fear was always the hardest to overcome, especially the fear buried in the depths of one's heart. This was a kind of self-escape instinct for humans and all living things. It was buried in the depths of one's heart, never to be touched. The more fearful it was, the more helpless one would be when facing it directly. The more powerful one was, the more fearful one was of not wanting to face it. The sextet illusion unearthed the deepest fear. Yale, how was it possible for him to walk out of it so easily? Moreover, his sextet illusion was a combination of the 5 elements and the yin and yang of heaven and earth. It was a product of experiencing life and death, of reincarnation, and of seeing through yin and yang. He had to thank Zhou Wu for stealing his celestial fate and causing his death. Only when his soul wandered between yin and yang did he comprehend the Tao of yin and yang. There shouldn't be a second person in the world who could comprehend this Tao. How could Yale break through such an unsolvable illusion? Could it be that he had made a mistake when he was setting up the illusion that he hadn't noticed? The 5 Elements Great Emperor couldn't help but wonder. What a pity! At that moment, Yale put his arm around the 5 Elements Great Emperor's shoulder, as if they were old friends. The 5 Elements Great Emperor, who was given the title of number 1 in all of history, turns out to be a warlock who only knows how to play around with illusions. And here I thought, I really didn't live up to my reputation. The 5 Elements Great Emperor snorted disdainfully, completely disregarding Yale's words. Not only that, but even though Yale had bound him, the 5 Elements Great Emperor didn't reveal a hint of fear. His expression was the same as ever, and he seemed even more fearless. During this time, he even shot Dongwang Tai a meaningful glance, indicating that he shouldn't worry too much. I have my own brilliant plan. Yale couldn't help but regard the 5 Elements Great Emperor's calmness in a new light. In terms of realm, Yale did not think that anyone in the Milky Way galaxy could be higher than him. In the Milky Way galaxy, he was just a powerless existence. No one could shake his position. The 5 Elements Great Emperor and the Eastern Monarch Tai were probably aware of this as well, which was why they'd used that kind of illusory art to trap him. However, if that was the case, then why wasn't the 5 Elements Great Emperor afraid? As expected of the 5 Elements Great Emperor, even in such a hopeless situation, he could still maintain his composure. Even so, standing in front of life and death, he should subconsciously feel fear. No one could face life and death directly. Although there were many people who could say so, when they knew that they would die, they would still struggle in their hearts. This kind of emotional fluctuation, it was impossible for Yale, who had merged with the emotion God King's Godhead, not to feel it. Could it be that he still had a backup plan? This would inevitably arouse Yale's suspicions. Moreover, Yale was a suspicious person to begin with. In front of loyal subordinates, he would always be cautious and careful. He would think twice about their every move. Not to mention the Five Elements Great Emperor. Five Elements Great Emperor, you really have guts. Based on your courage alone, I will take back my slanderous words. Yale laughed heartily and patted the Five Elements Great Emperor's shoulder. I'm very curious. Are you afraid of death? Death? The Five Elements Great Emperor froze. He turned around, his expression one of ignorance. Why should I die? Yale laughed maniacally. Do you think I'll let you go? Let's go. Are you living in a dream? The Five Elements Great Emperor shrugged, his eyes filled with confusion. You're the one trapped in an illusion. Don't you realize it? Take a gamble. This was the Five Elements Great Emperor's only thought. Want to defeat Yale? That was nothing but a fool's dream. This guy was a complete freak. He and the Eastern Monarch Tai had been watching him for a long time. Ever since he'd returned to the Divine Palace to extract Qinglan's godhead, they'd been guarding this place. Yale did not suspect that there would be someone else hiding in the chessboard. That was why he'd been here all this time. Fortunately, Qinglan's willpower was strong enough. No matter what Yale did, he couldn't extract the godhead. This indirectly lightened the burden of their mission. Otherwise, they'd tangle with Yale for a few days. Even if they gave up their lives, they wouldn't be able to do it. During this time, they discovered Yale's secret. He had a total of 4 godheads. This already defied common sense. For divine deity appeared on one person's body. So how could his power be resisted by an ordinary person? The Five Elements Great Emperor used illusions. He wanted to use the power of the Five Elements, but he couldn't defeat Yale. All he could do was rely on his illusions to buy time. At the very least, he had to buy enough time for Yi Zichen to rush over and take Qinglan away, preventing Yale from fusing with the Darkness Godhead. Right now, Yale had left the illusion. He couldn't defeat him. Yi Zichen hadn't arrived yet. What else could he do? He had no choice but to gamble. Ridiculous. When Yale heard that, his expression was filled with disdain. How could he not know whether or not he'd escaped the illusion? He wanted to use such low-level methods to defeat him? How naive. You don't need to doubt me. You're in an illusion right now. Otherwise, why would I be standing next to you and talking to you? I should have just run, all right? The Five Elements Great Emperor shrugged speechlessly, then pointed at the 6 layers of illusions. The illusions haven't been broken. What right do you have to say you're not in an illusion? Do you know what my illusions are capable of? How dare you brag so shamelessly that you're not in an illusion? Out of goodwill, I'll tell you this. My illusions combine the elements of the 5 elements and the yin and yang of heaven and earth to form 6 layers of illusions. Ha ha ha! 5 Elements Great Emperor. You're too smart for your own good. All of a sudden, Yale burst out laughing. If you hadn't told me the rest, I might have been a little apprehensive. But you just had to say you're digging out my inner fears. I'm not afraid. Ha ha, fear. What a joke. I am the supreme ruler of heaven and earth. What is there to fear? No, you're afraid. Chapter 2001. He was too good at bluffing. At the edge of the chessboard, Dongwang Tai could not help but nod inwardly. The 5 Elements Great Emperor was still the 5 Elements Great Emperor from back then. The Great Hoodwinker was still as powerful as ever. Back then, he'd gone to the Yao territory and taken a liking to Su Qingyin and Su Wan, who hadn't yet become the clan head. The Fox clan did not marry outsiders. Just look at the 5 Elements Great Emperor. He tricked these 2 female empresses into dueling with him and even created a rule in the fox race that the strong ruled. The winner, he could take the loser as his wife. In the end, this rule affected the entire demon race. Dongwang Tai was the demon race's demon emperor back then, but he didn't care about it. Why? The 5 Elements Great Emperor could be duped. After finding Dongwang Tai and chatting with him for half a month, Dongwang Tai's thinking changed to that the demon race was a place where the strong were respected. The strong deserved to have many wives. As long as the outsider was strong enough, the marriage would stabilize the strength of the demon race. To make the monster race stronger, look at the current situation. The 5 Elements Great Emperor's eyes blazed like torches as he stared emotionlessly at Yale. Even though his gaze was as calm as smoke, The certainty in his expression indicated that he was telling Yale, "You have to believe what I say. You are afraid of me." Was it scary? He had been dead for tens of thousands of years, and he had finally revived using his brother-in-law's body. His cultivation was still at half-step emperor rank, yet he still dared to try and trick Yale, the world's #1. He was really bold. Seeing this scene, Dongwang Tai wanted to move a small stool and sit down to watch the show. Little did they know, it was too exciting. The five elements' great emperor roared in his heart. Although he looked very casual now, the blood in his body was boiling. How long had it been since he had experienced such a feeling? Back then, when he came to the demon clan to deceive his two wives, it was too exciting. It was much more exciting than back then. Back then, those two were just silly little girls. There was nothing to be proud of after being tricked by them. Who was this person in front of them? The divine emperor of the god race. There were 4 godhoods on top of his head. With a single slap, he could turn him into minced meat, and not even his bones could be found. Being tricked by him would be the real thrill. Steady. Next, it was time to show off his true skills. Interfere? The 5 elements' great emperor? There must be something wrong with this guy's brain. Yale really wanted to laugh at the 5 elements' great emperor's conceit. What kind of existence was he? No one in the entire Milky Way galaxy is a match for him. The divine emperor was dead. Even if the god emperor was still alive, he and the monarch of the laws wouldn't be able to win. Fear of the 5 elements. Yale was very disdainful, but he didn't say it out loud. He had his suspicions. If the 5 elements' great emperor was lying, how could he be so fearless? If he was faking it, how could his heart not waver at all? One had to know, with a single slap from Yale, even his soul would not be left behind. How'd he do it? The feeling of touching the 5 elements' great emperor felt incredibly real. Could this be an illusion? You don't have to doubt it. The great hoodwinker, the 5 elements' great emperor, suddenly spoke. The East Monarch Tai's eyes lit up. This was his signature move. With his right hand resting on his cheek and his left hand in his pocket, the corners of his mouth curled up at 45 degrees. His eyes were filled with cynicism and disdain. His performance was about to begin. Back then, she had been fooled by the confidence and disdain he exuded. You think you're fearless? That's right. You're the divine emperor. You killed the old divine emperor, and the king of angels couldn't even withstand a single blow from you. You fused with 4 godheads. As long as you fuse with a 5th, you'll be invincible. Of course you're fearless. How did you know? Yale's pupils constricted. He pointed at the 5 elements' great emperor's foot and took a few steps back. This guy is still so good at reading people's minds. East Monarch Tai muttered to himself. Actually, what the 5 elements' great emperor had just said wasn't worth Yale's surprise. At the very beginning, East Monarch Tai had mentioned godheads, and Yale's response had been very indifferent. Why would he be so shocked by the 5 elements' great emperor? That was because he still suspected he was in an illusion. Coincidentally, the 5 elements' great emperor's words were exactly what he was worried about. He subconsciously wondered if his worries had been seen through by the 5 elements' great emperor. From the side, he really was in an illusion. This was actually the 5 elements' great emperor's most common trick, but it was also the easiest way to instill fear in the heart of the person being tricked. Afterwards, everything would go according to the 5 elements' great emperor's thoughts. Seeing Yale's expression, the 5 elements' great emperor's mouth twitched inwardly. Idiot! What was there to be surprised about? At most, outsiders didn't know about the godheads. But they'd been hiding here for so long, listening to the 5 elements' great emperor and Qinglan chatter every day. How could they not know? That was fine. With such a foolish person, the 5 elements' great emperor would feel much more at ease in the future. Why wouldn't I know? Everything I said was just the worry in your heart. You are in an illusion, and my illusion is digging into your heart. Everything in your heart will be directly displayed by the illusion. Now, you still dare to say that you don't know? Even now, you still dare say you're not in an illusion? Impossible! When he heard the 5 elements' great emperor's words, Yale subconsciously glanced at the sextet behind him. At first, he'd sensed the illusion digging into his heart. Unfortunately, he had no fear. No matter how much the illusion dug, it couldn't find anything that could make him feel fear. He was the supreme God Emperor of destruction. Even the heavens and earth had to bow before him. What was there to fear? But why? The five elements' great emperor knew what he was thinking. You don't believe me? Just as Yale was feeling doubtful, the five elements' great emperor said softly, "Then I'll make you believe me. Let me ask you, are you thinking that this is impossible? This emperor has no fear. So how could he know what I'm thinking? Are you thinking that how could he know what I'm thinking? Are you thinking that this is all fake? It's all a smokescreen." Bang! Yale's eyes widened, and he retreated several steps in terror. He'd hit the jackpot. Dong Wang Tai, who'd been watching the show, face-bombed again. Here it comes. Trick the second move. Grasp the psychology of being tricked. Back then, Dong Wang Tai had also been tricked into believing this. Later, he'd asked the Five Elements' Great Emperor to explain. The Five Elements' Great Emperor had calmly said that this was the most normal line of thought. However, anyone would think that way. Dong Wang Tai had tried it with other people, and it was just as the Five Elements' Great Emperor had said. Everyone thought that way, including the Yao race. Do you believe me now? The Five Elements' Great Emperor suddenly approached Yale with his hands clasped behind his back. You're fearless. You think you're fearless. But don't forget, this is a sextet. How can you break free of my six-layer illusion so easily? Chapter 2002. How dare you? Have you never feared me, the strongest person in all of eternity? How dare you? Have you never feared me, the strongest person in all of eternity? How dare you? Say you've never feared the strongest person in all of eternity. How dare you? The Five Elements' Great Emperor's words echoed in Yale's ears like a demonic tune. It didn't matter if he closed his eyes, even if he covered his ears with his hands and blocked his hearing. These words were like a demonic barrier that he couldn't discard. Fear? Had he? He thought back to the first half of his life. His life was full of misfortunes. He wasn't a descendant of a large family, but a lowly servant of the Qing clan. He wasn't willing to live a mediocre life. Because of his intelligence, he was recognized by the clan elders and became Qinglan's attendant. That was when he met Qinglan and Qingli. He condensed his soul at the age of 20. In a clan full of geniuses like the Qing clan, not to mention Qinglan. That year, he was 27 and Qinglan was 22. He didn't dare to tell anyone about the dark godhood he had condensed. He was sure that if he told anyone about it, the Qing family would definitely send him to the hands of the Divine Emperor. The Divine Emperor believed in light. Godheads were born from the heart. This darkness was a perfect reflection of his heart. The Divine Emperor would kill him. He found Qinglan and poured out his grievances like a close friend. He drugged Qinglan's wine and took advantage of her coma to snatch his godhead and give it to Qinglan. From that day on, there was no more news of the sword of heaven and earth. The entire Qing clan searched for it for 100 years to no avail. No one knew that Qinglan's godhead was with Yale. Only Qingli had a feeling that it was her brother's godhead. She didn't dare say it, but she didn't want to lose Yale as a friend. During this time, Yale had completely refined Qinglan's godhead. It was also during this time that he became the God King of destruction. God King, above billions of living beings, below only one person. He lived a life looked up to by all. No one dared to compete with his Tao of destruction. In countless planes, he never found a worthy opponent. From then on, he was fearless. Coincidentally, he had heard that the Five Elements' Great Emperor was the strongest person in all of history. At the time, he really wanted to challenge the Five Elements' Great Emperor, but unfortunately, the God race was too busy with official business. By the time he had some free time, the Five Elements' Great Emperor had already disappeared. Only after a long time did he learn that the Five Elements' Great Emperor had perished. Fear? It seemed like it had never happened before. Yet, the Five Elements' Great Emperor was speaking so arrogantly. I'm afraid of him. Ridiculous. I am the God Emperor of destruction, the king of all living things in this world. Why should I be afraid? In an instant, Yale's aura changed. Sensing that Yale's aura had changed, the East Monarch Tai subconsciously glanced at the Five Elements' Great Emperor. What was going on? Has he come to his senses? Unbeknownst to him, the Five Elements Great Emperor was also very confused. Based on the situation just now, his psychological attack had succeeded. Yale was already doubting himself in his heart. As long as he added a little more seasoning, he would be able to win. That would be the end of the show. Do not panic. This was the moment that would decide the outcome of the battle. It was absolutely not the time to panic. I have to drag Yale back. You don't need to deny it in your heart. I roam the infinite realms and am invincible under heaven. The title of number one in all of eternity is not something you can just say. It's only natural that you fear me. The Five Elements Great Emperor roared angrily, pointing at Yale. You're just running away from your fear of me. You don't dare face your own heart. That's what you're afraid of. Silence. Suddenly, Yale, whose aura had been in chaos, fell silent. He was speechless. The silence on the chessboard caused both the East Monarch Tai E and the Five Elements Great Emperor to frown. Did he succeed or fail? Suddenly, he wasn't vexed at himself, nor did he doubt the Five Elements Great Emperor's words. What was he doing just standing there? During this time, the East Monarch Tai E shot the Five Elements Great Emperor a look. It was as if he was asking for the outcome. The Five Elements Great Emperor frowned and shrugged, indicating that he didn't know either. He even signaled for Yi Zichen not to speak carelessly. If he gave himself away, both of them would be finished. Yale, who had been silent for a long time, couldn't stop laughing. What are you laughing at? Do you think you can hide the fear in your heart with a smile? Face my fear. If you can't overcome your fear of me, you'll forever live in this dream. Fear, Yale whispered. Still trying to escape? It's useless. The Five Elements Great Emperor snorted. Why would this emperor need to escape? He looked up at the Golden Go board, then at the Five Elements Great Emperor, who was less than 100 meters away. He slowly drew closer. The distance between the two continued to shrink. Monster Emperor Dong Wang subconsciously clenched his fists. He broke out in cold sweat for the Five Elements Great Emperor. As for the Five Elements Great Emperor, his heart was beating wildly, but there was no fear on his face. Since you don't want to run away, why don't you dare to face it head on? Why are you lying to yourself that you're not in an illusion? Am I deceiving myself? Yale twisted his neck, but his feet continued to lean toward the Five Elements Great Emperor. In just a few short breaths, he was already standing in front of the Five Elements Great Emperor. All he had to do was raise his hand slightly, and he could grab the Five Elements Great Emperor's neck. After that, he did the same. Gulp! Emperor Dongwang frowned and prepared to attack, but the Five Elements Great Emperor still waved at him, telling him not to move. When he saw this, no wonder the Five Elements Great Emperor had been able to trick him. Not many people could match his courage. Yale had already grabbed him by the neck, but he still wanted to turn the tables. What you said to me before, I'll ask you the same thing. Do you dare say you're not afraid of me? My hand is around your neck right now. Do you dare say you're not afraid? Yale asked, lowering his head. What do I have to fear? The Five Elements Great Emperor was still as fearless as ever. He shrugged. I'm just a projection of your inner fear. I'm an illusion that doesn't exist. You're choking me right now, but you're just strangling an illusion. If you strangle me to death, there will be thousands and thousands of me in the illusion. I am your heart's devil. I'm your inner demon, your nightmare, a nightmare you can't get rid of. Can you choke me to death? Yale asked, as if he hadn't heard the Five Elements Great Emperor's words. The Five Elements Great Emperor was dumbfounded. This time, he really knew he couldn't keep up the act. He hurriedly sent a secret signal to Emperor Dongwang Tai. A sinister smile flashed across Yale's face. Haven't you always wanted me to face the fear in my heart? If I choke you to death, I'll be facing the fear in my heart, right? Fuck. Flames suddenly burst from his arms, grabbing Yale's arms. Chapter 2003. A person with a strong heart was really hard to control. Just now, the Five Elements Great Emperor had tricked Yale a little differently than he had tricked East Monarch Tai and Empress Su Qingyan. Back then, he talked to them to provoke or approve of certain behaviors. For example, He provoked Empress Su Qingyan into a duel. If she lost, she'd have to become his wife. The Fox clan couldn't marry outsiders. He'd had the Empress forcefully change this rule, then reported it to East Monarch Tai. He'd even gotten the Yao Emperor to approve of the new rule. They were just typical examples. Among the Yao and God race's imperial emperors, there weren't many who hadn't been tricked by the Five Elements' great emperor. Even the demons. Unfortunately, the imperial emperors who'd been tricked by the Five Elements' great emperor ended up on good terms with him. This was all because, although the Five Elements' great emperor was tricking them, his methods were actually acceptable. Moreover, none of these incidents affected them or their clans. Or perhaps they'd hoped for the outcome to begin with. Yale was different. He was forcing him to admit that he was afraid of the Five Elements' great emperor. Forget Yale. Even if he told any other great emperor that they were afraid of him, even if they didn't admit it, they were afraid of him deep down. No great emperor would approve of him. Experts had their own pride, let alone the God Emperor of the God race, the leader of all realms, the God Emperor of destruction, Yale. Fortunately, the Five Elements' great emperor wasn't actually trying to convince Yale. He was trying to buy time. Just now, he'd managed to drag things out for so long from a certain death situation. That was already impressive. Hurry and save me. Seeing that Yale was about to attack, the Five Elements' great emperor didn't hesitate. If things went south, he'd ask for help. East Monarch Tai, who'd been observing the situation since Yale grabbed the Five Elements' great emperor's neck, naturally didn't hesitate. Buzz. The chessboard shifted. The patterns under their feet constantly shifted, and the space within the chessboard became chaotic. Yale and the Five Elements' great emperor's positions within the chessboard also shifted back and forth. During this time, the Five Elements' great emperor didn't hesitate. Water burial, pyramids, every illusion he could summon was directed at Yale. Child's play. These illusions might have had some effect on Yale the first time, but they were useless the second time. As soon as the water burial appeared, Yale burst out of the water. Just as the pyramid was about to be built, Yale destroyed it with a punch. However, the pyramid was made of sand and stone after all. The broken sand and stone still made Yale unable to see clearly for a few seconds. In just a few seconds, he was gone. Hey, Brother Dong Wong, you're just in time. I was almost turned into minced meat by this monster. I just came back and haven't seen my wife yet. I don't want to die. In a corner of the chessboard, the Five Elements' great emperor sat there, panting heavily. On the leather sofa. That's right, it was the leather sofa that only existed in the modern world, and it appeared in this space. You really have guts. You even dare to trick Yale. Who can do that? Do you think you can beat him? I definitely can't beat him. If I don't trick him, what else can I do? You're pretty good too. You managed to fool him for a while. I think he almost believed you. Then take a look at who I am, said the Five Elements' great emperor proudly. Then, his expression grew serious. Is that kid Yizichin here or not? I don't think this broken chessboard of yours can hold him for long. If you wanted to break it open, he'd have 4 godheads. Don't you think it'd be a piece of cake? See for yourself. A television suddenly appeared in front of the Five Elements' great emperor's sofa. The screen was like a movie, and the main character was Yizichin. He just so happened to be outside the Divine Palace. We're already here. That's not going to work. You're going to scare me to death. The Five Elements' great emperor's eyes flashed with relief. They were outside the Divine Palace. Given Yizichin's cultivation, it would only take a few minutes for him to reach the top floor and find the secret room. All they had to do was hold their ground for a few minutes. Even if the chessboard shattered, they had to do everything they could to prevent Yale from taking Qinglan's darkness godhead. 5 elements. You're not planning on using your brother-in-law's body to find the Empress, are you? How could that be? That ugly thing. Before the 5 elements' great emperor finished speaking, his tone changed. Who are you calling ugly? I'll lend you my body out of the goodness of my heart. But you're complaining about me? If you don't like it, you can leave. 2 souls sharing one body. I'm feeling rather awkward. I think you haven't had enough of a beating, have you? As soon as he said that, the 5 elements' great emperor started howling. East Monarch Tai didn't even need to think to know that the five elements' great emperor's soul was beating up the Lich Kings. Little bastard, it's only been a while since we last met, but you dare talk back to me? The five elements' great emperor clapped his hands, cracked his neck, and resumed the conversation. I've been preparing a host body lately. That kid's been trained by those shamans, and he's pretty skilled. I've got quite a few decent bodies. I'm thinking I'll refine them a bit when I have time, then return them to the kid. He suffered quite a bit for you, said East Monarch Tai quietly. Of course I know. A hint of gentleness flashed through the five elements' great emperor's eyes. He gently patted his thigh. At least I didn't treat him so well in vain. At least I know how to repay his kindness. But East Monarch, Zhou Wu, do you really have any idea where he went? Where'd he go? You want revenge? Asked East Monarch Tai. At first I wanted to, but the Emperor's star isn't him. It's that kid, Yi Zichen. I'm no longer the Heaven's chosen emperor, so there's no need for revenge. I just want to catch up and drink with him, and I also want to ask him what exactly he used back then. What he traded for celestial fate. What a great brother. Back in the day, the five elements' great emperor and Zhou Wu were sworn brothers. Although they weren't blood-related brothers, they were closer than that. Before becoming the god emperor, when the two of them joined forces, they defeated every demon, Yao, and demon in existence. No one dared say a single word against them. Back then, Zhou Wu had even helped Empress Su Qingyan and Su would become the five elements' great emperor's wives. Who would have guessed? That was the result. For the sake of the emperor's star, for the sake of the position of god emperor. Then you'll have to ask him yourself. East Monarch Tai laughed. I don't know where he is either. The last person to see him was probably the Hermit Emperor. You'll have to ask him where exactly he hid it. That old geezer. Chapter 2004. The Hermit Emperor. None of the gods, Yao, and demons knew of his existence. While great emperors like the five elements' great emperor were still young, the Hermit Emperor had already stood at the peak of the era. Take Monster Emperor Dong Wang, for example. He was a powerhouse who had survived from the Second Era. When he occupied the Yao territory and became emperor, there had been no news of the Hermit Emperor. Many years passed. The conflict between the gods and demons had reached an irreconcilable point. A great war was about to break out. The Yao supported the gods, and so the Second Era's civil war began. Blood and death, no victor was decided. The gods, Yao, and demons, on the other hand, experienced a massive reshuffle. 100 years, less than 100 years. The Hermit Emperor had suddenly risen to prominence among the gods. No one knew where this genius had come from. When people noticed him, he was invincible. No one in the entire era dared say they could defeat him. Monster Emperor Dong Huang hadn't fought him, but he could sense that he was unfathomable. Given his cultivation, he probably wouldn't last more than 100 moves against him. At that time, the Hermit Emperor was the undisputed #1 of the era. The gods were leaderless. The myriad divine mountains elected the Hermit Emperor, but he never had any extravagant hopes of becoming the god emperor. He only wanted to establish his hermit palace in peace. As a result, only then did Friday and the five elements' great emperor fight for the throne. If the Hermit Emperor took the throne, there would be nothing left for them to do. He really is extraordinary. Monster Emperor Dong Wang couldn't help but nod. He had survived the Second Era. No matter who he was looking at, he could see through everything with just a glance. Sumer, for example, the survivors of the Second Era all interacted with each other. The Hermit Emperor never. It was as if he had lived for this era, but his actions were incomprehensible to many of the survivors of the Second Era. If he were an ordinary person, then the survivors of the Second Era would be too ashamed to show their faces. When I have time, I'll definitely dig out all of that old bastard secrets, the five elements' great emperor said confidently. You're just bluffing. As soon as Monster Emperor Dong Wang finished speaking, the two looked at each other and laughed. At that moment, a cold snort interrupted their laughter. This soft snort came from Yale. The gravel had already dispersed. Looking at the empty chessboard, Yale knew that the two of them had hidden themselves in the chessboard again. He didn't go looking for it in a rage. Instead, he used this brief moment of peace to sort out his emotions. How long has it been? Yale himself had forgotten how long it had been since he had been so angry. Even when facing Gushwanda, this was the lover's bay that had once snatched Qing Li away from him and left him with the humiliation of his life. He was angry, but not to this extent. Even the king of the laws, sealing his deity ocean, turning him from a high and mighty god-king into an ordinary person who had no divine power and was inferior to even the most ordinary god. Even if he was angry, it wasn't to this extent. The Five Elements' great emperor, he actually used such a trashy smokescreen to make her doubt herself with his stupid mouth. This was something that Yale could not tolerate. He was so angry that he almost lost his mind. The desire to destroy was like a flame with gasoline added to it, burning fiercely. At that time, his only thought was kill him. He wanted him to die a horrible death to prove his Tao heart. He wanted to destroy the Five Elements' great emperor. He wanted to destroy the East Emperor Tai. Now, he had already calmed down. The two of them still had to die, but the reason for their deaths was different. He didn't need to kill to prove his Tao heart. He was the #1 supreme king in the world. There was no need to prove it. These two clowns, killing them was nothing more than crushing two ants that were in his way. That was all. He used some smokescreen to hide again. But where could he hide them? Wasn't it just this chessboard? Do you want to play hide and seek with me? The low voice resounded throughout the chessboard. The cold words made the hearts of East Emperor Tai and the Five Elements' great emperor tremble. Look, you've angered him. Go and settle it. The one who spoke was East Emperor Tai. He pointed at the wall of the space and asked the Five Elements' great emperor to leave. Can you have some conscience? The Five Elements' great emperor glared at him, speechlessly. I tricked him to buy more time. Moreover, it didn't stop me back then. So why did it become my own business? Oh, what do you mean by oh? The Five Elements' great emperor stomped his foot in anger. You won't be able to find your chessboard anytime soon. So he hit it. What if I break it? This is a treasure I brought from the Second Era. The Five Elements' great emperor was confused. He didn't want to talk to East Emperor Tai any longer. No, after leaving this place, they wouldn't meet again. It was just a stupid auxiliary divine artifact. He had a hand over his brother of so many years. Little did he know, if East Emperor Tai knew, he'd definitely grumble that he didn't treat Five Elements as a brother. Brother? Why hadn't he considered that they were brothers when he'd tricked him? Do you think this chessboard can save your lives? Yale's words exploded in the Five Elements' great emperor and the Eastern monarch Tai's ears like a death knell. Noticing East Emperor Tai's gaze, the Five Elements' great emperor collapsed onto the sofa. You want me to leave? That guy's crazy. Have you ever seen anyone fight a mad bull? Oh, another word. However, East Emperor Tai's eyes betrayed his thoughts. He really wanted Five Elements to leave. Unfortunately, the Five Elements' great emperor clearly wasn't going to throw his life away. He blinked. Then you could just lie here. No more moves? The Five Elements' great emperor said disdainfully. Oh, East Emperor Tai said another word, then shrugged. I was going to let you stay here, but since that's the case, I'm going to move to another dimension. Once I leave, this place will probably become part of the chessboard. I was wrong. He hurriedly admitted his mistake. This definitely wasn't the time to play dumb. The Five Elements' great emperor knew very well that if he left now, he'd definitely become a living target for Yale. Then shut up. The Yao Emperor squinted his eyes. When the Five Elements' great emperor heard this, he made a zipping motion with his mouth. Hey, are you sure you can't come out? Do you think your stupid chessboard could trap me? If I destroy this chessboard, don't you dare. Shut up, East Emperor Tai suddenly said. If you want to destroy it, then destroy it. Don't talk so much. You're annoying me to death. The Five Elements' great emperor gave him a thumbs up. Chapter 2005. Divine Palace. The old god sovereign liked things simple. The Divine Palace didn't have any fancy decorations, and there weren't any buildings around. It was all green vegetation. He liked these. I think green represents hope. What the galaxy needed was hope. At that time, the tallest of the lush trees could reach the clouds. Unfortunately, Yale did not like them. destruction. What he hated the most was the smell of life. The life force released by this plant made him feel irritated. He did not change the divine palace. But on the first day he took office, he destroyed the forest that the old god sovereign had spent billions of years cultivating. As far as the eye could see, it was barren and barren. He liked it very much. From time to time, he would stand at the peak of the divine palace and look down at his masterpiece. However, if Yale were to see his masterpiece being covered in a dazzling golden red color, who knew what he would do? Amidst the raging flames, a sigh of regret could be heard. At the periphery of the flames, there were tens of thousands of true gods. Their eyes were filled with fear, but they still stood in front of the god palace. Not long after, a young man bathed in fire walked out of the flames. His eyelids drooped as he walked very slowly. In his hand was a charred body that had been burned by the flames. Dong! The corpse was thrown to the ground. It fell to the ground less than half a meter in the air, but the corpse turned into dust and was sent far away by the wind. At the same time, a child walked out of the flames. His body was also burning with the same flame as the young man. Only his pitch-black eyes were exposed. Tens of thousands of deities, the moment the two of them walked out, they tightly gripped the weapons in their hands. Their brows were tightly furrowed, and their throats could not stop moving up and down. It could be seen from their expressions. They were afraid. How could they not be afraid? As far as the eye could see, everything within 100 meters of the divine palace was shrouded in flames. On the ground, the flowing golden red blood was the blood of their compatriots. Blood flowed like a river. In less than 100 breaths of time, tens of thousands of their people had died at the hands of these two people. What are you guys persisting for? In the eyes of the true gods, the murderous young man suddenly stopped. His hands fell to his sides as he looked at the dense crowd of deities in front of him. I don't want to kill you. I just want to enter the divine palace behind you. Why do you want to use your lives to fight for a few seconds? Could it be that your lives are so worthless? Who cares about them? They're just a bunch of mindless dogs. If you don't kill them, they will kill your people. No one would have thought. The child, who looked less than 5 years old, spoke words that were even colder than the edge of a knife. Hey, don't tell me you're starting to bemoan the state of the universe again. Is it even possible? The young man shrugged and smiled. He was just feeling a little emotional just now. No matter what, this was a living being. Even if they stood on opposite sides, it was always better to kill less. His purpose of coming here was not to kill, but to find Yale from the divine palace behind them. If he killed and destroyed everything in his path, what was the difference between that and Yale? He was right. This youth was the lord of the epic, Yi Zichen. As for the child beside him, it was a fire elemental spirit, one of the 5 elemental spirits. Back off. Give up the divine palace behind you, and I will let you go. When these words came out, the deities were moved. The young man in front of him was simply too terrifying. They could not imagine how high this person's realm was. They only knew that as long as they continued to stand here, they would not be able to survive. All they knew was that as long as they persisted, they would surely join in. Anyone who dares back off will die. At that moment, a cold voice rang out in everyone's ears. When the deities heard this voice, they instinctively trembled. Under Yi Zichen's gaze, a middle-aged man appeared in front of the divine palace. Songen, the head of the Song family. The deities before him were all of the Song family's clansmen, the last of their clansmen. He recognized Yi Zichen. He'd seen Yale's portrait, and he participated in the alliance treaty the previous god emperor had signed with the epic. He also knew this was the lord of the epic. He was the instigator of the unprecedented war between the epic and the outsiders. The reason he appeared here was definitely because of Yale. He'd warned them in advance, so he'd brought the entire Song family with him, whether they were women, children, or elders. It didn't matter if they were lower gods or middle gods. They'd all come. Clan head, young master. Some of the clansmen ran up to Song, sobbing. They wanted to say something, but stopped. Their faces were filled with sorrow. It was obvious that their young master had died. Songen's hands trembled. In truth, he'd seen it all. Just now, when Yizichin walked out of the flames, the charred corpse in his hands was Song and Sun. Clan head, this person is too terrifying. If we keep fighting, the Song family will be gone. You're the clan head. Yizichin spoke up as well. Is there a problem? Songan pushed aside the sobbing clansman, then strode to the front of the deities. He looked Yizichin straight in the eye. No problem. Yizichin shrugged. I just don't understand how someone like you could become the clan head. What? Is there something you don't understand, Lord of the Epic? You pushed your clansmen into a pit of fire. You knew it was a hopeless situation, yet you forced them to endure. You're pushing your clan towards destruction. You're ruining your foundation. Do you think you're qualified to be the clan head? Songan laughed disdainfully. What do you know? These were Song and's true thoughts. Would the Song family survive if they didn't show up? That's right. If they let Yizichin enter the divine palace, the Song family might preserve some of their strength. But no matter who won, Yale or Yizichin, the Song family wouldn't be able to survive. If Yizichin won, even if the entire God realm was destroyed, the angels were the Epic's people. They would expose the Song family's evil deeds. Even if the Epic didn't care, the angels would avenge the Angel King and wipe the Song family from the face of the earth. If Yale won, they would let Yizichin in without any resistance and ruin his grand plan. Would Yale let them go? Even if the Song family fought, even if only one of them survived, given Yale's temperament, he would say, I trust you so much. But what did you do? After that, he killed the person who survived. The Song family would still be destroyed. It could be said that from the moment Song and Yale decided to overthrow the God realm, when the Epic attacked the God realm, the Lord of the Stars appeared in front of the divine palace. When Yale walked out of the divine palace and faced the Lord of the Stars, the Song family, they had no other choice. Chapter 2006. How sad. Songan smiled wryly. No one could understand the struggle in his heart. Was he not a competent clan head? Did he not want his clansmen to live? He did. To him, the most important thing was his clansmen. Even his son. In his eyes, he was equal to the other clansmen. Sometimes, he might even have to be sacrificed. Like just now, he had sent a voice transmission to his son, telling him to go up. The clansman's mission was to protect their clansmen. The young master was the same. Who didn't know how strong the Epic Star-Lord was? When he was alone with Yale, Yale had personally acknowledged the Epic Star-Lord's strength. Unfortunately, they belonged to two factions. Didn't he know that there weren't many over-gods in his clan? Going up against the Epic Star-Lord, who could fight against Yale, was like throwing an egg against a rock. But what could he do? He had no choice. The only thing he could do was to let his clansmen stall for time until he saw if Yale could step in. Then, his clansmen would be able to live. But he couldn't refute Yizichin's words. He was indeed an incompetent clan head. It was he who had made the worst decision, causing his tribe to fall into a dilemma. Clearly, all he had to do was wait for his son to grow up, to become an overgod. Such a young overgod would cause the other clans to look up to the Song clan. His status depended on his sons. That was nothing to be ashamed of. He was too impatient. He wanted the Song clan to stand up for him too much. He thought himself clever and followed the ambitious Yale. All of this, it didn't matter whether his intentions were good or bad. In the end, the Song clan was going to be gone. He didn't deserve to be the clan head, nor did he have the face to face the Song clan's ancestors. Song clansmen. Suddenly, Songan raised his arm and shouted. Yizichin could tell from Song An's expression that he was suffering. He didn't know what this suffering was. But Song An's actions, he knew what he was about to face. Since that's the case, I respect your decision. I just pity your clansmen. With that fire, wind, rain, lightning, everything. Do you need us now? The lightning elemental sprite's voice was filled with arrogance. So troublesome. The water elemental sprite continued to lie lazily. I will try my best. The shy and timid wind fairy hid behind Yizichin's cloak and grabbed the corner of Yizichin's clothes. Why let them come out? I can handle it myself. The fire elemental sprite raised its head proudly. There are other helpers, seeing the three additional elemental spirits. The bitterness in Song An's eyes intensified. But it didn't matter. Even without them, the Song clan would not be able to escape the misfortune of being terminated. You hate me, right? Song An muttered in his heart as his hand ruthlessly descended. Kill. Whoever dares to retreat will die. Kill. The people of the Song clan did not hesitate at all. They raised their weapons and charged forward. Perhaps they also knew their patriarch was in a difficult position. They also knew that they had no choice. Sister Phone. Ao understood. Wind spirit, wreak havoc. The wind elemental sprite floated in the sky like a little angel. In the blink of an eye, a violent gust of wind appeared out of nowhere and enveloped the divine palace. Hee flames. The fire elemental sprite chuckled, and the flames within 100 meters transformed into countless giant flaming beasts. Buffeted by the wind, the flames burned more and more fiercely. Water. The water elemental sprite was indolent and spoke slowly. I'll leave this place for you to play. I'm in a hurry and can't waste any more time. With that, the wind picked up under Yi Zichen's feet. He turned around and saw that the wind elemental sprite had given him an elemental blessing. It even smiled shyly at him. Thanks. Yi Zichen waved at the bashful wind elemental sprite, then prepared to take advantage of the chaos to enter the divine palace. Lord of the epic star, Song An's godhead shone brightly above his head as he stood in front of the palace gates. Lightning. Yi Zichen was in a hurry, so he couldn't be bothered with Song An. He directly summoned the lightning elemental sprite. The lightning elemental had been waiting for him for a long time. Bang! There's a seal. The lightning elemental sprite roared. He'd arrived so quickly just now that he'd crashed into the seal. A seal? Yi Zichen looked towards Song An, only to see him shrug. If you want to enter, you'll have to step over my dead body. I gave you a way out, but you don't want it. Since you want to die, then fine. I'll grant you death. The more anxious he was, the more problems there were. He'd said a bunch of nice things to Song An, but Song An wouldn't listen. Since that was the case, there was no point in hesitating. What's more, with his current cultivation, if he wanted to kill someone who'd just reached the over-god level. Boom! At that moment, Song An's aura suddenly rose. Then, Yi Zichen saw two godheads appear above his head. Yell had given them to him. Song An couldn't say that he'd gotten nothing. In fact, he'd gotten some useful ones. For example, the second godhead. However, his affinity with the second godhead might not have been enough, or his soul might not have been able to contain the power of two godheads. If he used it, he'd feel a tearing pain all over his body. He'd never used it to outsiders. Even his son didn't know he had two godheads. At that moment, I have to use it. That demoness really was right. You gods really do have multiple godheads. You do look domineering, but unfortunately, you ran into me. Crack. The ground beneath Yi Zichen's feet instantly cracked open, forming a 100-kilometer-long gorge. The explosive force caused Yi Zichen to instantly arrive in front of Song An and punch him in the face. This punch, it was enough to completely shatter Song An's head and godhead. It's over. Dong. But just as his fist landed, crack, Yi Zichen's arm was broken. The intense pain caused Yi Zichen to frown, but it wasn't a big deal. His body would heal on its own, and his arm would soon be as good as new. However, he didn't understand. How did Song An had turned into a stone statue. I know my own limits. I know that even with two godheads, I'm no match for Star-Lord Yi. Coincidentally, I'm proficient in the earth element of the 5 elements. Coincidentally, your water elemental fairy of the 5 elements of heaven is outside, so it won't be long before you can break out of the earth. The stone statue slowly opened its mouth and spoke. This voice was indeed Song An's voice. You can enter the hall if you want, but if you destroy me, no one will stop you. Yi Zichen instantly clenched his fists. The veins on his arms bulged like vicious pythons. Chapter 2007. Boom, boom, boom. The explosions reverberated in the 5 elements' Great Emperor and Dong Wang Tai's ears. Their eardrums. They felt like they were about to burst open. Fortunately, Dong Tai used a single sentence to successfully pull Yale, who had regained his rationality, back to the point where he no longer had any rationality. On the chessboard, Yale, his hands were like thousands of godly cannons, constantly firing energy cannons. Unfortunately, he had 4 godheads above his head to supply him with energy. In less than a minute, he'd fired no less than 10,000 energy cannons. In the chessboard room, the 5 elements' great emperor crouched in a corner, trembling. Dong Tai wasn't much better. Golden liquid dripped from the top of his head every now and then. The two of them hid quietly in the corner, covering their ears and complaining to each other. "What the hell are you doing?" The 5 elements' great emperor roared in Dong Tai's sea of consciousness. Why was he provoking Yale? The two of them were already at a disadvantage. If they didn't provoke him, the chessboard wouldn't last much longer. Provoke him. Look at the energy cannons. They were setting off firecrackers on New Year's. Crackle, crackle. You're still provoking him? What are we going to do now? If your chessboard breaks, where will we go? You're blaming me? Dong Tai snorted. If you hadn't tricked him so ruthlessly, I wouldn't have been able to light him up. You're blaming me? Who else should I blame? Don't forget, you're living under my roof. If worst comes to worst, I'll just throw you out. Yale'll definitely tear you to pieces before he thinks of me. Do you believe me? The 5 elements' great emperor instantly shut up. Of course he believed that. He dared to say with certainty that in Yale's heart, the person he hated the most was definitely him. If he went out, tens of thousands of cannons would instantly land on him and turn him into a sieve. This was his last refuge. Fine, you win. Blame me, all right? The 5 elements' great emperor shrugged. He had no choice but to admit defeat. Given his understanding of the Eastern monarch Tai, he had no choice. Given his understanding of Dong Tai, it wasn't impossible to throw him in. Dong Tai only glared at him and didn't say anything else. Brother, let's not argue about whose problem it is. After admitting defeat, the 5 elements' great emperor put on a rare serious expression. He shrugged and said, "Everything we did was to buy time. Am I right?" The demon, the arch, glanced at him and didn't say anything, but the look in her eyes indicated her agreement. He was here to buy time. Otherwise, who would be so bored as to come and touch the tiger? Even children knew that a tiger's but should not be touched. Only if the two of them were stupid would they come to find trouble with Yale for no reason. Since that's the case, we should consider the most important issue for us. How long can this chessboard last? This must be the most important. If the chessboard broke, the two of them would have nowhere to hide. This was a separate space. Yale's destruction great Tao was useless here, so he could only use energy to charge forward. But if he went out, even if the two of them used spatial Tao techniques to hide in the void, Yale would still be able to pull them out. Don't even think about running. How could a god emperor with 4 godheads not be able to catch up to the two of them who had yet to transcend? Dong also checked the chessboard. He hadn't checked before because he was afraid he'd fall into despair once he learned the specifics. But now, there really was no miracle. 70 to 80% of the chessboard space had already been destroyed. There were already quite a few places without golden liquid and cracks. If this continued, and at most a minute, the chessboard would shatter. During this time, the 5 elements' great emperor had been watching closely. Very good. He already knew the result. All right, then let me ask you this. If you hadn't provoked Yale, how long do you think we could have held out? Maybe half the time. Then why did you provoke him? Tell me. How dare you say it wasn't your fault? The 5 elements' great emperor leapt to his feet, pointed at Dong and cursed. Didn't you say you weren't going to mention responsibility? Dong was no longer as strong-willed as before. To tell the truth, he really did have a lot of responsibility. If he hadn't provoked Yale, the two of them really could have held out a little longer. But the 5 elements' great emperor had been too annoying. He'd vented his anger directly on Yale. I didn't think that much at the time. Besides, Yi Zichen was already fighting his way out the door. Given his progress, he should be able to enter the secret room before the chessboard shatters. Are you sure? Is there a problem? Those people outside can't stop him at all. Are you blind? The 5 elements' great emperor roared again. Do you watch TV or not? I don't like using modern technology, and I don't like watching. Then hurry up and watch. In response to the five elements' great emperor's roar, Dong Wang Tai looked at the TV. He saw it. His expression changed. What? What's going on? Why is he still at the door? Is he sealed in a fixed space? Why ask if you can tell? The five elements' great emperor's eyes were bloodshot. You're thinking about your own things, but you didn't even look. He's been trapped for half a minute. Heavens, it looks like he won't be able to escape anytime soon. Are you serious? Dong Wang Tai didn't believe him. Yi Zichen had fused with all of the Emperor Star's radiance and the five elements. Yale was with them. Who could seal him for so long? What do you think? Why else would I be in such a rush? This. Dong Wang Tai licked his lips, unsure of what to say. He never would have guessed that a seemingly useless little minion could seal Yi Zichen for so long. And Yale was still so fierce. I haven't even gone to see my wife yet, and you're already going to kill me. The five elements' great emperor sat on the sofa in a huff, then took out a cigarette and put it in his mouth. However, he didn't seem to know how to smoke, so he coughed uncontrollably. Dong Wang Tai couldn't help but sigh when he saw his expression. He walked up to him and comforted him. It's fine. My game is very stable. At the very least, I can still fight for us. Fight? Dong Wang Tai didn't dare mention a time. Just as he paused. Fight for what? Cute little mice. Yale's divine sense suddenly forced its way into the five elements' great emperor and Yao Emperor Donghuang's divine senses. The next moment, they saw a hole in their room. Light drilled into the hole, and not long after, the hole was blocked, revealing a gray pupil. It was Yale. His eyes were fixed on them. Game over. Little mice that like to hide in the shadows. At that moment, the five elements' great emperor looked like he was about to die. The cigarette he'd been choking on fell to the floor. His hands drooped, and his head hung low. Chapter 2008. To Dong Wang Tai, this was a terrible day. No, it was a terrible day. The chessboard was a treasure he'd brought back from the Second Era. To him, it was his most precious treasure. He had a lot of treasures. As a Yao Emperor, he wasn't considered the Hermit Emperor's strongest expert. No one could match his ability to hide his treasures. Of course, not even the venerable of numinous treasures. He'd been trapped in the Shui family's dungeon for tens of thousands of years. When Yale was about to take out the Darkness God King's godhead, he'd been considering how to seal it. After much thought, after a lot of calculations, he'd finally decided to use the Qi chessboard. When he used it, he'd thought about the consequences of the chessboard's destruction. He was in a terrible mood. There was nothing he could do. This was for the future of the entire era, for the countless parallel planes, and perhaps for the entire Milky Way galaxy. Yale, he wasn't a good ruler. He'd planned for the worst, and he'd worked with the person he hated the most. He'd accepted it all, but now he was on the brink of death, dying for the greater good. Sorry, he didn't have such lofty thoughts. Unfortunately, this was the situation. The chessboard wasn't small, and there was only a 1 in 100 million chance of reaching here. He'd touched it. He'd always been one of the luckier ones. He'd survived the Second Era and become a Yao Emperor. He now suspected that the short-lived five elements great emperor was the reason. His good luck had been overshadowed by bad luck. That unlucky fellow. He was still complaining about his own fate and saying useless words. Doomed. Who didn't know? Did he need to say it? He knew it was doomed, yet he didn't think of a way to deal with it. He was just muttering like a child. What was the point? Hey, hello, cute little mouse. In that brief moment of thought, the hole that was only the size of an eye was actually enlarged by Yale to the point where an arm could fit inside. Yale's hand waved to them around the room. Then he pulled his arm out and looked at them. You were very arrogant before, but I don't know if you'll still be so arrogant. And that friend of yours, he seems to have been scared out of his wits. Do you need to comfort him? How infuriating. Dong Wang Tai hated this kind of tone and tone the most. If anyone dared to talk to him like that, he would have punched them so hard that even their immediate family wouldn't be able to recognize them. Right now, I can't beat him. His friend in the corner was still drawing circles, and no one knew what he was doing. The scene on the television, they were still trapped. Let me see. Are you broadcasting the situation outside the Divine Palace? That little guy who was almost devoured by the starlight is here. Are you trying to buy time for him? Let me see who is trapping him. Songin? This loyal dog has really satisfied this emperor. This emperor wants to reward him. But from the looks of it, he shouldn't be able to survive. So just praise him in your heart. Yale looked at the TV in the room, minding his own business and saying something useful or useless. He was very relieved. The divinity of the Darkness God King was still safe. Yale was well aware of the strength of Song and's manifestation seal. Moreover, he had taken out 2 godhoods. No matter what, it should be able to trap Yizichin for a few minutes. He only needed a minute to deal with the Eastern Monarch Tai and the 5 Elements Great Emperor. Why aren't you saying anything, cute little mouse? And the one squatting there, didn't you say that this emperor was afraid of you? Why are you squatting in the corner, not even daring to look me in the eye? Could it be that you're afraid? Aren't you a living body in an illusion? Aren't you not afraid of this emperor? The 2 great emperors in the room tacitly fell silent. During this time, Yale kept provoking them with a playful tone. The hole in the room made him grow larger and larger. 5 elements. 5 elements. Calm down. We haven't reached the point of despair yet. Hey, I can see through your divine sense. Just as the Eastern monarch was consoling the 5 elements great emperor, Yale suddenly interrupted. 5 elements. The Yao emperor ignored him, continuing to call out to the 5 elements great emperor. Stop shouting. He's already scared to death. What a joke. The mighty number 1 emperor of all time is acting like an ant right now. How about this? Little ant, come out and kneel before this emperor, and this emperor will let you go. You're serious? In an instant, the 5 elements great emperor shot up from the ground, his eyes filled with hope. Of course, said Yale. Give me some time to think about it. No, I've already seen through your scheme. It's impossible for you to buy time. This emperor doesn't have time to wait for you. Come over now. All right. The 5 elements great emperor seemed to have made up his mind. Step by step, he approached the hole. 5 elements. The Yao emperor stared at him, his eyes filled with disbelief. You can't, why not? I want to live. I've been dead for tens of thousands of years, and it wasn't easy for me to come back to life. I want to see Wan and Qing Yin. They must be exhausted from waiting for me. I have to live. The 5 elements great emperor was determined. Yale couldn't help but nod. Yes, it's always good to be alive. Can you trust him? He'll kill you later, said the Yao emperor. I won't, said Yale. I trust you, laughed the 5 elements great emperor. My life and death are in your hands. I have no choice. With that, the 5 elements great emperor ignored the Yao emperor's attempts to console him. He walked right up to the hole. I'm going to kneel. Aren't you going to use your own eyes to witness this? Of course, this emperor has always been looking forward to it. Yale chuckled as he looked at the hole in front of him, waiting for the 5 elements great emperor to bend his knees and kneel on the ground. 5 elements. I'll kneel. The veins on his face bulged, and the 5 elements great emperor's knees buckled. Yale's eyes darted back and forth, as if he were nodding, just as his knees were about to touch the ground. F***CK off. A lit cigarette appeared in the 5 elements great emperor's tightly clenched hands. The burning cigarette but was directly pressed against Yale's eyes. For some reason, Yale didn't dodge, allowing the cigarette, but, you think you're worthy of making me kneel? The 5 elements great emperor fiercely cursed. When he opened his arms, the skin on his palms had been scorched by the cigarette. Then, he turned to the Yao emperor and made a victory sign. Success. Chapter 2009. Afraid? If it weren't for the fact that he had to complete his plan with the Yao emperor, Yale wouldn't have let his guard down. The 5 elements great emperor almost burst out laughing. The 5 elements great emperor almost burst out laughing. Afraid? He was someone who died before. Died. What was there to be afraid of? His soul had wandered the world for tens of thousands of years. He'd seen far too much. But, in truth, he still somewhat admired Yale. Even though the 5 elements great emperor had walked the line between life and death, he still felt fear. Fear of nature. Fear of heaven and earth. Fear of the unknown. And also, he was afraid of the tears of his two beauties. Even though they discussed this a long time ago, the five elements' great emperor's words had been sincere. He'd come back to see his two wives. He wanted to see them again, no matter the price. If he and Emperor Dongwang had really been forced into a corner, Yo could make him kneel and live. Even if it was fake, he was willing to try. Dignity, it wasn't even worth mentioning in front of them. The eyes would always be a person's weakest point. This had nothing to do with cultivation. Even if you became the ruler of heaven and earth, your eyes were still weak. No one could train their eyes to be invulnerable. Emperor Dongwang and the five elements' great emperor had indeed been forced into a corner. They wanted to escape. That was the only way. The moment Yale broke into the room, the two of them had come up with this plan purely through tacit understanding. There was no communication between the two of them. They'd been lucky. They'd succeeded. Yale's arrogance had led him to believe that victory was already in his grasp, leading to this situation. How much longer can your chessboard hold him back? Don't ask. Let's run. The Yao Emperor was frantic. Actually, when the five elements' great emperor had aimed his cigarette at Yale's eyes, Yale had already given an early warning and made a move to retreat. Unfortunately, how could his careless actions resist the Yao Emperor and the five elements' great emperor's deliberate plans? It was the chessboard. Don't forget that the chessboard was the Yao Emperor's territory. He could use his consciousness to change the interior of the chessboard at will. Here, it couldn't be said that he was the creator, but he was almost there. Just when Yale was about to retreat, countless golden lines had already appeared on the chessboard and tightly bound Yale, causing him to be unable to move at all. He did not close his eyes immediately. In that case, he could only watch helplessly as the cigarette was inserted into his eye. All right. The five elements' great emperor hurriedly nodded in agreement. He knew very well. This time, Yo would be completely enraged. If he were to really go berserk, how could this chessboard withstand the impact of his energy? I'm preparing to put away the chessboard. Get ready, Dongwang suddenly said. No way. You still want to take it? As he spoke, the demon in the arch had already begun to prepare his hand gestures. He didn't know why this chessboard was so important to the Yao Emperor. Seeing that he had already made up his mind, the five elements' great emperor could only silently curse him as a miser and a madman. Then, all that was left was to wait for him to take back his hand. You should be able to find the location of the darkness godhead right away. Suddenly, Dongwang spoke again. Are you preparing to? Before he could finish, he saw the Yao Emperor's expression. I have to put away the chessboard. I don't have time to look for the godhead. The five elements' great emperor shrugged helplessly. All right, I'll go. When he heard this, the Yao Emperor used his eyes to say, At least you know what's good for you. Then, his expression turned solemn. Get ready. Boom. Not even half a breath's time had passed before a majestic energy shockwave appeared on the chessboard. It didn't even give the Yao Emperor a chance to retract it. Yale's godly might immediately shattered the chessboard. The chessboard transformed into golden rain that rained down on the Divine Palace's secret room. Damn it, my chessboard. The Yao Emperor cursed. The chessboard had shattered, and his heart really was bleeding. Seeing that the Yao Emperor was still enraged by the destruction of the chessboard, the five elements' great emperor hurriedly tugged at his arm. What are you waiting for? Are you waiting for death? Even so, Dongwang still reached out and grabbed a drop of the chessboard's golden rain, holding it in his palm. Then, only then did the five elements' great emperor react as quickly as possible to save the unconscious Qingluan. The chessboard shattered. The chessboard space shattered. Everyone was now in the Divine Palace's secret room. Yale's entire body was releasing bloody steam, and his left eye was still bleeding. He looked at them with only one eye and pointed at the five elements' great emperor and the Yao Emperor. I'm going to cut you into 1,000 pieces and make you wish you were dead. Boom! Violent, godly power stirred up a raging wind. The surging wind sent the five elements' great emperor and the Yao Emperor flying into the secret room's walls. The deafening sound caused the Divine Palace to shake twice. 2 mouthfuls of blood fell to the ground. If there were no surprises, the Yao Emperor and the five elements' great emperor's internal organs had most likely ruptured. But The moment he hit the wall, the five elements' great emperor shot up and charged at Qinglan, his eyes filled with sharpness. No matter what, Qinglan couldn't fall into Yale's hands. If he was allowed to condense a darkness godhead, the entire world would be finished. No one would be a match for him anymore. You want to steal the darkness godhead? Scram! He punched through the air. The five elements' great emperor charged at Qinglan, but a fist imprint suddenly appeared on his back. He coughed up a huge mouthful of blood. The blood was mixed with bits of internal organs and flesh. Five elements. The Yao Emperor yelled. He leapt up and grabbed the five elements' great emperor, using his body as a backrest to help the five elements' great emperor slam into the wall. Whoosh! Large amounts of gravel fell from the ceiling of the secret room. The Yao Emperor ignored his own injuries and hugged the five elements' great emperor, only to discover that his pupils were already unfocused and lifeless. Blood flowed uncontrollably from his mouth. From time to time, he coughed and spat out bits of internal organs. Five elements. Hold on. You can't die. Didn't you want to go see the Empress and the others? Didn't you say you wanted to give them a surprise? You just came back to life. You can't die. Huh. You still have time to talk about him? None of you. A purple ball of energy suddenly appeared in front of Yale's blinded eyes. I'm going to strip your souls and let them taste the most excruciating pain possible. Five elements. Five elements, wake up. You can't die. Die. The ball of light shot out of his fingers. The secret room was less than 100 meters wide. With the ball's speed, it took less than a millisecond. Suddenly, a pair of enormous hands that seemed to blot out the sky suddenly descended from the sky. They smashed the roof of the divine palace to pieces and grabbed the purple ball of light. Chapter 2010. In the words of the Yao Emperor, the person he hated the most in the Third Era was the Five Elements' great emperor. He was always full of nonsense. He might act like a senior to juniors, but he didn't act properly to other great emperors of the same realm. He didn't have the air of an expert at all. Not only that, but he also had a strong influence on the people around him because he was jumping horses and monkeys every day. His personality was similar to that of the people around him. He was always noisy. The Yao Emperor clearly liked peace and quiet. He'd told the Five Elements' great emperor many times, but he wouldn't listen. Every day, he would buzz in his ears. Even in his dreams, the Yao Emperor hoped he'd never see him again. But even under these circumstances, when Yale's purple energy shot out, the Yao Emperor's first reaction was to hug the Five Elements' great emperor tightly and use his back to block the attack. You're really troublesome. In his final moments, the Yao Emperor still blamed the Five Elements' great emperor. A golden pill appeared in his palm, and he sent it straight into the Five Elements' great emperor's mouth. Live well. Don't you want to see Qingyan and the others? A warm smile appeared on the Yao Emperor's face. It was the smile of an older brother doting on his much younger brother. He said he didn't like it, but his heart and actions betrayed his thoughts. Actually, he and the Five Elements' great emperor were as close as real brothers. A golden pill. He brought it over from the Second Era. It was a pill condensed from the golden liquid on the chessboard. It was a treasure that could allow people on the brink of death, even those with shattered souls, to recover. The Yao Emperor originally wanted to keep it for himself. As he'd said before, he really wasn't that noble of a person. In the face of death, everything had to make way for him. He dared to participate in dangerous situations several times, all because of this gene Dan, which gave him a sense of security, even if he was on the verge of death. As long as he consumed the golden pill, he'd be safe and sound. And then, who cares? He wouldn't do something so risky. But now, he'd given the golden pill, or rather, the hope of survival, to the Five Elements' great emperor. I really want to see you put on a show again. The Yao Emperor let out a long sigh. Then, he closed his eyes and released all the spiritual energy in his spiritual sea. Brother, I didn't expect you to care about me so much. Hey, do you think you've fallen in love with me? That won't do. I have a family. If you want to show off, you won't be able to see it just because you want to. This familiar voice and tone, as well as that annoying bullshit. He opened his eyes. After devouring the golden core, the five elements great emperor stared at the Yao emperor's face. The demon the arch was the same as him. Was he still alive? Looking at the surroundings, the entire secret chamber was in shambles. There were gravel everywhere, and the top of his head felt a little chilly. He looked up at the sky. Above them was a pair of hairy arms. The entire top of the divine palace was gone, and he was sheltered under a pair of furry arms. Just look at this hand. His main body was at least 10,000 feet tall. Were they saved by this giant beast? That energy ball, just now? Brother Dongwang. If it weren't for Yale, I really wouldn't have known that your feelings for me were so deep. From now on, we're blood brothers. I'm your big brother, and you're my little brother. How about I take you to eat and drink well? Unsurprisingly, he was shameless. He was sure this wasn't a hallucination. It was all real. In an instant, the Yao Emperor's expression changed. He pried open the five elements great emperor's mouth and stared inside, spit out the golden core. Blarg, the five elements great emperor struggled violently. He wanted to speak, but he couldn't close his mouth. All he could do was retch. The five elements great emperor pushed the Yao emperor away, then rubbed his cheeks. He made sure his mouth wasn't dislocated. You have to take back what you gave me. I've already eaten it. Even if I spit it out, you can still use it. I really regret it. Why did I give you the golden core? The Yao Emperor's face was full of anger and pain. He really felt bad for his golden core. His treasure. It was a golden core he'd kept for countless years. He'd almost died several times, but he still couldn't bear to eat it. In the end, he'd given it to the five elements great emperor. Io, don't be so angry. How about this? I'll just make it up to you. Make it up to you, my ass. Hey, bro, laughed the five elements great emperor. How did you know I want to make it up to you? Come closer. This is immortal energy I've been saving for 10,000 years. It tastes absolutely authentic. Scram, you two bosses seem to be in a good mood. You even have time to bicker. At that moment, hearty laughter sounded out from behind them. The five elements great emperor and Yao emperor turned around and saw Yi Zichen sweating profusely, his hands in front of him. In his palms, a strand of azure light was visible to the naked eye. It was hitting that furry foot and that tiny head. Was that Yale? Light. It was hitting his body. At this point, the Yao Emperor finally saw the full body of the furry arm that had saved his life and the five elements great emperors. It was a bear. It had long, greenish-brown fur and glowing white eyes. There was also a silver crescent moon between his eyebrows. A silver moon azure bear. Hey, this big guy. Be reasonable. Although the five elements great emperor was from the first era, he'd traveled to many planes. Back then, he and Zhou, they were in their prime. Their hearts were filled with lofty aspirations as they traveled north and south. They'd seen far too many alien life forms. Otherwise, they wouldn't have known about the time corridor, and Zhou wouldn't have gone to such lengths to exchange for the five elements' celestial fate. But he'd never seen such a large Yao before. He didn't know if it had used its dermic projection. If it hadn't, it would be far too shocking. Five elements. The Yao Emperor furrowed his brows. No matter what, the demonic beast in front of them was their savior. The five elements' great emperor's words were far too rude. I'll definitely repay you for saving my life. He bowed deeply. The five elements' great emperor looked at him and bowed as well. He was thinking the same thing as the Yao Emperor. To be able to step on Yale. Extraordinary. This Yao was truly a divine beast. The five elements' great emperor turned to Yi Zichen and shouted, Kid, you're too slow. Little brat Yi, you're too slow. Both of us almost died because of you. You'll have to make it up to us later. He didn't even need to think about it. To be able to break the seal, it was most likely the work of this demonic beast. With such a powerful Yao helping them, why didn't they summon it earlier? Why did they have to risk their lives? Chapter 2011. Situation? Something wasn't quite right. In the eyes of the East Monarch and the five elements' great emperor, Yale, with four godheads, was absolutely terrifying. To be able to push two of them, who were at the pinnacle of their epics, suppressing him to the point where he had no means to resist, one could well imagine how terrifying he was. But Yi Zichen wouldn't have to struggle so much. At this moment, he was the strongest in the entire realm. It would not be an exaggeration to say that he was even stronger than the Star Lords of the First and Second Era. He had the complete Emperor Star's radiance. The Tao Law he comprehended was the Tao Law of the 5 elements of heaven, and he also had the corresponding elemental spirits of the 5 elements with him. During his growth, he had the help of many experts. Regardless of whether it was his starting point or his growth, he had now reached a realm where he could fight against Yale. Why? He looked towards Yi Zichen. There was no problem with him releasing starlight from his hands. The 5 elements' great emperor, who had once been chosen by the Emperor Star as its master, had the most say in this matter. He was sure this was the radiance of the Emperor Star. He had the suppression of the beasts and the support of the Emperor Star. Yale's energy was so strong that even Yi Zichen found it difficult to deal with him. If that was the case, who could keep Yale in check? What are you guys thinking? Suddenly, Yi Zichen's voice appeared in the Eastern Emperor and the 5 elements' great emperor's seas of consciousness. Are you still watching a show? Don't you know to come and help? Watching the show? Perhaps it was because of this suspicion. However, that was based on the assumption that Yi Zichen could do it. After all, they had relied on their meager strength before. He had trapped Yale for so long. They had almost died at Yale's hands. For the sake of their own lives, they actually wanted to stay out of it. Furthermore, they knew very well that it would be useless even if they made a move. Perhaps he was belittling himself. However, the situation was as such. Their realms were no longer sufficient to intervene in the clash between 2 supreme beings. Just as the 5 elements' great emperor was about to speak, another roar came from his sea of consciousness. Oh my God, this isn't my real body, bro. At that instant, both great emperors were stunned. Not the main body. What? My main body is still sealed outside. This is a clone that I created in advance. I originally wanted to do something else. Now that my main body is trapped, I can only use my avatar to come over. The Yao Emperor and the 5 elements' great emperor's faces instantly darkened. What the hell? He thought that reinforcements had arrived, but it turned out to be a clone. Outside the Divine Palace, Yi Zichen furrowed his brows, but he didn't pause in the slightest as he slammed into the statue. That's right, he was still trapped here. The strength of this stone statue seal was far beyond imagination. Although the sealed statue posed no threat to Yi Zichen at all, it was only a matter of time before Yi Zichen shattered it. But the current situation could affect the direction of the battle at any moment. Sealed like this, Yi Zichen was indeed safe, but the entire era, or rather, the entire Milky Way galaxy, was in danger. Damn it, break for me. The majestic power slammed into the stone statue. While he was sealed, Yi Zichen tried everything he could think of. The power of stars, the power of the 5 elements, spiritual power, divine power. However, the statue didn't seem to have any weaknesses. Even when Yi Zichen used water of the 5 elements, it barely had any effect on it. Conservatively speaking, if he wanted to come out, how much longer will it take for you to break free? The 5 elements' great emperor and the Yao Emperor didn't dare waste any more time. They unleashed their power and strengthened their control over Yale. Conservatively speaking, I'll need at least an hour. Are you joking? When they heard this, the Yao Emperor and the 5 elements' great emperor couldn't help but roar. An hour. They'd nearly died, but they'd only managed to trap Yale for less than 5 minutes. An hour. That was a little less than an hour. Even if they risked their lives, they couldn't possibly hold him for that long. Dong Wang, take the darkness godhead and leave, shouted the 5 elements' great emperor. That was the only thing they could do. There was no way they could seal Yale until Yi Zichen broke free. All they could do was prevent the darkness godhead from being seized. Run away. Let's see if we can stop Yale from obtaining the darkness godhead for the next hour. As long as the darkness godhead was in their hands, Yale wasn't invincible. All right. Yao Emperor Dong Wang understood the importance of the godhead. He decisively gave up on reinforcing Yale's seal and walked over to the green waves. Dong! Just as the demon the arch reached out his hand towards Qing Lan, a huge force repelled him. Suddenly Yale, who was trapped underground, laughed in disdain. None of you can even think about stealing the darkness godhead from me. It belongs to me alone. Oh no. They couldn't help but vomit inwardly. Yale had long since protected the darkness godhead. Dong Wang, you don't need to tell me. I know. Bang, bang, bang. Break. Demon Emperor Dong Wang kept trying to break the seal that Yale had left on Qing Lawn. But the difference was too great. He hadn't even transcended. There was no way he could break Yale's seal. Do you think you can fight me with just a few of you? So long as I fuse with the darkness godhead, no one in this world will be my match. Unfortunately, your only hope is still trapped. Huh? Yale's tone was arrogant. Even though he was like the Monkey King, suppressed by the Five Fingers Mountain, he still looked down on everyone. Huh, but you can't fuse with it now, snorted the Five Elements. I can't, but do you really think you can trap me for an hour? As expected, Yale saw through them. He'd already been able to force his way into the Five Elements and Donghuang's consciousness. This time, Yi Zichen's transmission didn't escape his notice. Do you really think you can seal me? I just don't want to waste too much energy fusing with the darkness godhead in my peak state. Otherwise, what are you? As soon as he finished speaking, Yale raised his head. Silver Moon Azure Bear, you really are loyal. You knew Qing Lan was in trouble, so you transformed into your true form. Judging by your strength, you must have burned your lifespan, right? I forcefully push my strength to its peak, but how long can it last? How long can 15 minutes be? Rumble. Suddenly, the foot on Yale's back exerted more force. The entire godhead collapsed. Yale couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. Azure blood. His blood was no longer the golden red of the god race. It was azure. Big Brother should have just killed you back then. It's his fault he didn't. Back then. Can we go back to the past? You're very loyal, but you can only look on helplessly as I dig out his godhead. Chapter 2012. His arrogant laughter echoed in the void for a long time. The blue blood at the corner of his mouth, coupled with his wanton laughter, magnified his arrogance infinitely. He had no fear. For him, he was bound to win. The collapse of the Divine Palace alarmed countless people. This building was like a landmark of the divine race. Even the gods who were fighting in other areas could clearly see the Divine Palace disappearing before their eyes. Then the ground shook violently. The Divine Palace collapsed. The hope in their hearts also collapsed. It's over. The divine race is finished. From the beginning, the extraterritorial gods were at a disadvantage. They were on the verge of despair several times, losing confidence in their enemy era. It was the faith in their hearts, the longing for the future, the responsibility to their loved ones standing behind them. It made them climb up again and again in despair. With their battered bodies, with their blood-stained hands, they held the weapons in their hands to face the attacks of the era again and again. These longing responsibilities, expectations for the future. But most of them came from Yale. As long as Yale was still there, as long as Yale was not defeated, everything they did was meaningful. For billions of years, the Divine Palace had been the symbol of the extraterritorial gods. As long as it existed, the gods were not afraid of not being able to find their way home. They were invincible and fearless. They knew all this. Behind them stood the Divine Emperor. The old Divine Emperor left. Yale became the new Divine Emperor. The gods did not support him, but he used his iron fist to make them yield. Despite his brutality, his strength was recognized by everyone. At such a desperate moment, even the gods who hated him hoped that he could stand up. They regarded him as their last hope. But the Divine Palace collapsed. Yale did not become their savior. The divine race had become a soldier. Even the most ordinary gods had to put on the heavy armor of a warrior in order to survive. In order to survive. For the future. To wield the weapons in their hands. I give up. At some point, a god threw down the weapon in his hand. He was really tired. The weapons that fell to the ground were full of holes. He really did not know how many experts of the era he had killed. He did not know how many of his brothers had died. The only thing he knew was that he had been killing people all this time. He watched as others were killed. When blood splattered on his face, he only wiped it off slightly before continuing to kill with his weapon. He was afraid of dying at the hands of others. His body, There were more than 100 scars, big and small, and the godhood above his head had already become dim. Even if he didn't give up now, he wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer. Kill me. He didn't beg anyone to spare his life and give him a way out. He just smiled and looked at the demon experts in front of him. All he wanted was to die. He was responsible for himself if he didn't try to survive. He is a warrior. They could only die in battle. Becoming a captive was an insult to his entire life. He didn't want to carry this stain on his life. Puff! He showed no mercy. At the start of the decisive battle, the Outer Realm God race was the enemy. Surrender and be spared? This was no longer the same as it was in the beginning. For the God race of the Outer Realm to be able to fight until now, who would have less than 5 or more lives of the people from the epics in their hands. Why should such a person be allowed to live? Keep him. Make the dead feel uneasy in the underworld? The demon expert directly cut off his head with the scythe. Blood splattered everywhere. At the moment of his death, there was an indescribable satisfaction and ease in his eyes. It was finally over. He could finally have a good rest. He wanted to die. It was he who didn't have the courage to commit suicide. He had children and also an old mother. He didn't know if they were still alive, but at this time, he hoped that they would be like him. This was what he thought was the best outcome as a father and son. Death, this was true liberation. Alive, this was true torture. He wasn't the only one who had this kind of thought. From the collapse of the Divine Palace until now, it had only been a few dozen seconds. Such scenes were constantly playing out in various places of the God race. A large number of God race members threw down their weapons. But not everyone had the will like that God race member who wanted to die. Survival. Actually, this was the most important thing. Among the God race members, there were many who wanted to beg for a way out. Unfortunately, what welcomed them was a head-on slash. Their godheads were crushed. The reason was shockingly similar to that of the previous demon expert. These executioners of the God race, who were stained with the blood of the heroes of this era, were not worthy of being captives. The butcher's knife was waved, as if it was slaughtering chickens and sheep. In an instant, the overall strength of the God race decreased sharply. Many slaves brought back from other planes, even those with strong combat power, died along with these God race members. Their lives came to an end. Damn it, what are you doing? Seeing the God race members throw down their weapons, the commander couldn't help but roar. But those God race members didn't seem to hear him. There was no desire to live in their eyes. They threw down their weapons. If they could live, they would live. Death was also a relief. Wake up, all of you. Commander, our brothers are tired. At this time, a man wearing heavy armor walked out from among the God race members. Looking at the decoration of his heavy armor, his rank should be that of a deputy general. His armor had long been refilled with blood. He even lost one of his arms. With a bleak smile, he slowly took off the helmet on his head. Placing both hands on the ground, he knelt on one knee. This subordinate has followed Commander for more than 50,000 years. I once swore to be loyal to Commander, to become the sharpest blade in Commander's hand. No. The Commander seemed to realize something, shaking his head hard. Commander, this subordinate's sword is blunt, and I'm tired. Commander, please allow this subordinate to be freed. Then, this deputy general gently kowtowed. His lips kissed the ground under his feet. Then, the godhead above his head suddenly radiated brilliance like the last radiance of the setting sun. No, I won't allow it. No, Commander, this subordinate will leave first. This is also the last thing this subordinate can do for you. No, boom, self-detonation. The deputy general's godhead self-detonated. Even though the godhead's divine power was on the verge of drying up, the energy released from the self-detonation still flattened everything within a radius of 10,000 miles. In this area, whether it was the god race or the experts of the era, no one was spared. However, compared to the previous surrender, this self-detonation dealt a heavier blow to the era. After a long time, when the raging wind from the self-detonation of the godhead dissipated, only the commander remained in this area. Tears streamed down his jet-black face. Why? Why did you all give up and leave only me? Why? The god race isn't finished yet. We still have troops in the Outer Realm. They're already on their way back. The commander's eyes were filled with sorrow. This area was filled with his soldiers, his closest subordinates. He was in pain. As far as the eye could see, the area within a radius of 10,000 miles was flattened by the Godhead's explosion. He was the only one left, and the wind that made him feel even more lonely. Actually, death is really a release. I don't think their choice was wrong. Suddenly, a black-robed man appeared in front of the commander. The commander recognized him. He was the era's Emperor Hades, one of the 4 great auxiliary stars, Literati star. Chapter 2013. Thousands of miles away from the Protoss race, a man wearing the same armor as the extraterrestrial Protoss commander stood in the sky. Beneath his feet were countless extraterrestrial Protoss warriors. That's right. They were the Protoss warriors sent by Yale to invade other planes. There were no surprises. This time, they returned triumphantly and captured countless captives. Those extraterrestrial clansmen who had lost their homeland. Their faces were branded with the humiliating mark of a slave. They were being driven by the extraterrestrial Protoss back to the Protoss race. To the extraterrestrial Protoss, everything was wonderful. They did not expend much energy after winning a complete victory. On the way back, they even met their comrades who were heading to other planes. Without exception, they all won a complete victory. The commanders gathered together to discuss the interesting things they had encountered during the invasion. They even said it shamelessly, those women from other planes. The warriors also discussed among themselves. Those harsh words fell into the ears of the slaves, making them clench their fists. In their hearts, they slandered themselves for being useless. It was natural for them to be proud. They would definitely be rewarded by Yale after they returned from such a victorious battle. Money, they did not need it anymore. Whether it was the commander or the warriors, they could all get a share of the spoils of war. To be recognized by the God Emperor, to them, this was the most important reward. Halt! At this moment, the true God who was on guard at the front suddenly shouted. Even though the extraterrestrial Protoss had won every battle, and this was the way back to the Protoss race. But no one could be sure that there would not be an ambush from other planes here. Victory made them arrogant. But when it came to matters of life and death, these commanders were still very cautious. Being ambushed, this was a very dangerous matter. The shouts of the vigilant made the warriors stop. Their eyes instantly became alert and sharp. The other commanders also stopped chatting when they heard that. What's the problem? Commander, there seems to be clansmen from other planes ahead. Other planes? The commanders were stunned. They did not expect that their caution would save their lives. In the end, there were still people from other planes. Unfortunately, if they were warned in advance, then their ambush could only end in a crushing defeat, no matter what plane it was. As long as the extraterrestrial Protoss was on guard, the result was death. This was the arrogance that came with victory. Looks like I want to give us more military merits. The chief commander laughed heartily, and so did the other gods. Tell us where their ambush point is so that everyone has a plan. After that, we'll continue to march and catch them off guard. No. Commander, what? He spoke hesitantly, but if he had something to say, he would say it directly. Could it be that you've taken a fancy to one of the girls in the ambush? No problem. As long as you can capture her, I'll reward her to you. The warriors of God below laughed out loud. This kind of situation often happened among them. Any warrior who fancied a girl from the plane would ask the commander-in-chief for instructions. The commander-in-chief naturally approved. There were plenty of girls, so there was no need to fight with his subordinates. No, this isn't it. That isn't it. What exactly do you want? The commander's eyes were filled with anger. It's them. What's wrong? They didn't ambush us at all. They were waiting for us openly. Really? The commander-in-chief frowned slightly. Instead of ambushing them, they took the initiative to wait for them to pass. These fellows were really bold. It was hard to imagine that it had come to this. To think that there was such a reckless plane. Commander, this subordinate feels that there's a trap here. Yes, that's right. There's a huge problem. The commander-in-chief nodded. Go out and take a look. See if they're doing this on purpose, or if there are ambushes in other planes. Especially behind us. We need to check carefully to see if anyone has taken a detour. Yes, the god received the order and left. The other gods remained where they were, waiting for the result. However, not long after that, God walked out, in front of everyone's eyes. He exploded into minced meat. While the Outer Realm gods instantly raised their weapons. The few commander-in-chiefs squinted their eyes into a line. So brazen. Check what? We are already standing in front of you. What do you have to be afraid of? Aren't the Outer Realm celestial race invincible? Why would they be afraid of an ambush? Suddenly, a jade-green, middle-aged man walked out in front of everyone. He strolled back and forth in front of the Outer Realm celestial race army. Not long after, he was less than 1,000 meters away from the celestial race army. In so many planes, I have never seen someone as reckless as you. The commander-in-chief narrowed his eyes and muttered, "Thank you for your praise." The middle-aged man bowed politely. "Speak, which plane are you from? Let's see if you're the survivors of our fight, seeking revenge, or if you're an idiot who is about to fight but is in a hurry to reincarnate." Ha ha! The deities laughed along with him. The Outer Realm middle-aged man was still full of smiles. He did not react much to the commander-in-chief's disdain. He even replied with a smile. "Green Rain Race." Green Rain Race? The commander-in-chief frowned. He was quite unfamiliar with this race's name. Not long after, one of the commander-in-chiefs raised his eyebrows. "It's you guys? Thank you. There are still people who remember us, the exiled race." At the mention of exiling, the commander-in-chief, who had always been arrogant, suddenly understood. You guys? Green Rain Race. They had once lived in a plane adjacent to the Outer Realm Protoss. However, due to certain reasons, the Green Rain Race was exiled to the most barren land at the border. Since then, there had been no news of the Green Rain Race. Many Protoss had probably forgotten about their existence. The commander-in-chief was one of them. "Back then, our Protoss spared your lives and exiled you guys. We had almost forgotten about you. Even if we fought you, we wouldn't be able to hit you anytime soon. Who knows? We might not even hit you. You deliberately came back this time. Why are you in such a hurry to die? Arrogance is an instinct of the Protoss." No. The commander-in-chief wagged his finger. "This is confidence that comes from the bottom of our hearts." "That's not wrong." The middle-aged man smiled and nodded. "The Outer Realm Protoss has always occupied the position of hegemon. Countless planes do not dare to compete with them. With the support of such a race, confidence is indeed innate. Are you here to flatter me?" The commander-in-chief laughed. "Fine, I will give you this chance. Say something nice, and I'll try to plead with Lord Yale on behalf of your tribe to let your tribe live." The middle-aged man continued to smile and ignored the commander-in-chief's sarcasm. "I'm just curious. If the Protoss you rely on is gone, will you still be so arrogant? No, confident. Gone?" The commander-in-chiefs looked at each other and laughed. "You can't be trying to tell me that you just annihilated our Protoss, right? Ha ha. We don't have that ability. Then shut up. But others do." The middle-aged man continued to smile as he looked at the commander-in-chiefs. Look at this lunatic. Others do. The commander-in-chief laughed at the other commander-in-chiefs and mocked the Green Rain middle-aged man's crazy words. "Who can? Don't tell us it's Ji Yuan." To the Outer Realm Protoss, Ji Yuan was the greatest threat to them. This wasn't what the commander-in-chiefs thought. Yale had said it himself. The commander-in-chiefs were actually very disdainful. They thought that only their Star Lord had some strength in Ji Yuan, but it was nothing in front of Yale. It was also Yale's intention not to destroy them immediately. Otherwise, their army would have long set out for Ji Yuan. Chapter 2014. The Green Rain people so calmly and confidently said that the person who destroyed the Outer Realm Protoss was Ji Yuan. The Outer Realm Protoss commander was startled. In an instant, everyone burst into laughter. From the commander to the most ordinary Protoss warriors, no one believed the words of the Green Rain people. "Did you come to make us laugh on purpose?" Ji Yuan destroyed the Outer Realm Protoss. Dream on. To the Outer Realm Protoss, Ji Yuan was a low-class plane. The overall strength of the Protoss could not withstand a single blow. The great emperors who stood at the peak could only match their lords at most, and they needed to be the best among the emperors. If not for Ji Yuan's good luck in having the Emperor Star Lord, the Outterium Protoss would only need to send a few lords to destroy Ji Yuan and let them know what despair was. Such a low-class plane, the Green Rain people must have lost their minds. You should know very well whether I'm joking or not. If nothing unexpected happens, the garrison of the Protoss should have sent you a lot of signals. But looking at you, you don't seem to know about it. Or are you deliberately ignoring it? Signals? In an instant, the expression of the signal officer next to the commander changed. They had indeed received the signals. A few days ago, he had received news from the garrison of the Protoss. But the commander looked down on the commanders of the garrison, especially Bai Ning. He thought that Bai Ning was old, but he still sat in the commander's position, making it difficult for people to obey him. The commander also hated the arrogant messages from the garrison. Therefore, when there were messages from the Protoss, the signal officer directly pretended not to see them. He did not report them, nor did he check them. Signal officer, commander, did the insiders send us any messages? What's the content? Subordinate. The signal officer's expression froze. He did not dare to look directly at the commander's eyes. His fingers were clutching his pocket, which contained the signal device that could communicate with the garrison. Looking at his expression, the commander could guess most of it. Look now. Yes. The signal officer nodded in a panic. He took out the signal device, and his divine sense penetrated it. As if it had lost its power, the signal device, which was as light as a feather to them, suddenly fell from his hand. The commander next to him reached out and grabbed it. Bang. The signal officer knelt on the ground. Please, Commander, crack. The signal device in his hand was crushed, and his eyes were bloodshot. The other commander-in-chief, who were unaware of the situation, saw the expressions of the signal officers and their colleagues, and roughly guessed the contents of the signal device. Commander-in-chief, spare me. The signal officer crawled over on his knees and grabbed the commander's thigh. Commander, do you know what you do? Commander. Puff. The signal officer, who was still hugging the commander's thigh and begging for mercy, had his skull smashed by the commander. As for the godhead, it was crushed into powder in his hand. Looks like you understand. I'll take my leave then. No one tried to stop the middle-aged man from the Viridian race. Whether it was the commander, the deputy general, or the god race warriors, they all stared at the commander. The scene of the signal officer's death replayed in their minds. Everyone returned to the god race at full speed. It was very confusing. Due to the previous triumphant return, the subordinates of different commanders gathered together to chat. At this time, he suddenly gave the order to rush back at full speed. The Green Rain race also sent over news about the situation of the commander and the signal officer. Everyone knew. The Green Rain race's words were true. The god race was in trouble. The commander charged at the very front. They knew very well that experts of their level were superior to tens of thousands of gods. They would have a huge impact on the war. The other deputy generals stayed in the camp and organized the troops. They lagged behind by half a step. What's going on? The signal officer. Could it be? As the commander sped along the road, someone asked, "What's the situation? Will our god race really? It's not that exaggerated. With Lord Yale around, how could the god race be destroyed by Ji Yuan?" The commander snorted angrily. The other commanders heaved a sigh of relief. However, not long after, the commander spoke again. But the situation is definitely not optimistic. Could it be? The news from the inside came several days ago, and the red signals have been flashing nonstop. I'm afraid that Ji Yuan has really fought his way in, and our internal situation is very dangerous. The commander's expression was solemn. I wonder how His Majesty is doing. If nothing unexpected happens to him, our god race will not be defeated. As for the situation, we must hurry back as soon as possible to find out. As soon as he finished speaking, the commander snorted angrily again. I've already said that Bai Ning is not fit to be the commander. From his words, it seemed that he had placed all the blame on Bai Ning. Actually, this was inevitable. Even though the two of them had a personal grudge From a most direct perspective, such a huge change in the god race's internal situation definitely had something to do with the commander. Bai Ning's dominance had caused the other commanders to lose their ability to think. If it had been another commander, the situation might not have been so bad. 3 heads were better than 1. Moreover, the sparks of conflict between commanders of the same realm might be even more vigorous. Bai Ning, he was just too smart. His subordinates all had their own thoughts, which led to such a huge disadvantage in the early stages. It was difficult to recover in the later stages. Then let's hurry up. The other commanders realized the seriousness of the problem and increased their traveling speed by more than twofold. But why did the Green Rain race come to warn us? The god race exiled them. They should be resentful. Suddenly, as if they had telepathic thoughts, the commanders stopped at the same time. Their gazes looked ahead. Only then did they realize that it was not because they had telepathic thoughts. It was because they saw it was a dense mass of people. There was no end to them as far as the eye could see. And the middle-aged man from the Green Rain race that they had met before stood at the forefront. "Sirs, we meet again." It was still a light smile, but in the eyes of the commanders, it was no longer the cowardice and stupidity from before. It was a coldness that made people shiver. These people shouldn't be here to welcome our triumphant return and to seek refuge with the god race, right? The commander narrowed his eyes. "What do you think?" The middle-aged man chuckled softly, his words revealing a hint of coldness. "Are you preparing to challenge the god race? You have seen for yourself how many elite true gods there are in our legions. Millions. Do you understand the concept of millions? To destroy a plane, we only need 1,000,000 warriors. Are you sure you want your Green Rain race to disappear now?" The commander did not want to fight with them. The god race was their home. They needed to rush back in the shortest time possible. The other god warriors also followed. When they saw the commander who had stopped and a vast army in front, everyone's heart turned cold. "We have been waiting here for a long time. It is not good to threaten us as soon as we arrive. However, I'll let you know that the god race has been destroyed." The middle-aged man from the Green Rain race shrugged and smiled. "Of course, our Green Rain race is afraid of being exterminated. We also know the fighting strength of the god race." So, before he finished speaking, several men and women appeared next to the middle-aged man from the Green Rain race. When they appeared, the commander's heart turned cold. The people in front of him were the supreme experts of the various planes. Some had attacked, some had not attacked, and some were preparing to attack. The fact that they appeared meant that their clansmen had also appeared here. Do you all want to be exterminated? Everyone knows the god race's ambition. We all know the principle of being interdependent without the lips. Ji Yuan is attacking the god race, and he has the chance to destroy you. If we don't do something now, then, why are you saying so much to them? All of a sudden, a woman covered in flames walked out from the crowd and stared at the commander. The commander remembered her. She was the queen of the fire demon race. When they attacked the fire demon plane, the queen escaped from his hands. Her eyes were filled with hatred. At that time, he had thought leaving her alive would be a disaster. However, the fire demon race was almost exterminated. Less than 20% of them escaped. They were no threat to the god race. Unexpectedly, she came too. "You still remember me, Lord Commander," the queen of the fire demon race sneered. Her resentful gaze was like a piercing sword. "I will return your words back to you. The future of the god race is over." Chapter 2015. Emperor Hades. Within the god race, the commander who had just lost his trusted aide stared at Ming Di with fiery eyes. Executioner. In his eyes, this gentle-looking youth was an executioner. The outer world commander, a god who knew how many people had died at his hands. He was like the Grim Reaper, harvesting the lives of the outer world clansmen. Little did they know, in the eyes of the other planes, the outer world celestials had always played this role. "I'm quite famous among the outer world celestials. A lot of people who wear equipment like yours know that I have a title," Yi Zichen said. "Not bad. I'm quite happy." Emperor Hades grinned at the commander, not the slightest ripple of energy emanating from him. "You found me. It seems I'm your target this time. That's right. The commander's heart sank. He knew how strong Emperor Hades was. Commanders like them had made their judgments a long time ago. There were many people in this era who could threaten their lives. Of course, it was just a threat. When they fought, they had a 50% chance of winning. However, there were only 3 people who could render them powerless to resist. Emperor Star-Lord, Gushwanda of the ancient race, and Emperor Hades. Needless to say, the Emperor Star-Lord was the strongest in this era. It was normal that they couldn't beat him. Divine Emperor Yale had said more than once that he only had a 70% chance of winning against the Emperor Star-Lord. Gushwanda. He'd fought the God King Yale to a draw 10,000 years ago. So much time had passed. Lord Yale had become a divine emperor. Gushwanda naturally wouldn't stagnate. He was one of them. Finally, there was Emperor Hades. No matter how you looked at it, Emperor Hades was much weaker than the other 2. There was no intelligence on him fighting against the outer world celestials. And although he had a star, one of the 4 auxiliary stars, he was the least battle-savvy of the auxiliary stars, the Scholar Star. Why would he be placed among the 3? It was because he had a supreme treasure in his possession, the River of Time, a treasure that could devour and refine souls. Now that Ming Di had found him, it was safe to say that he had no chance of survival. But now, the fact that he was still alive was already a death sentence. Actually, this was not a bad thing. Almost all of his subordinates had died in battle, and there might be a few lucky ones who were still alive. However, his army would not be able to reappear. As the commander-in-chief, there were foreign races who had sacrificed their lives for the god race. His death would be glorious. He didn't want to buy too much time for himself. He also knew that Ming Di wouldn't give him too much time. All he wanted to know was what Emperor Hades had said. Is he really not coming back? He didn't say it out loud, but he trusted that Emperor Hades knew what he was asking. Yes, he can't come back. Why? Right now, there are about 30 Plains clansmen and supreme experts waiting for them outside your god race. Do you think they can come back alive? Is that so? When the commander-in-chief heard this news, his heart suddenly trembled. Soon he sighed and smiled bitterly. Actually, he had long expected such a situation to occur. Actually, he had some reservations about Yale being the god emperor. Or rather, most of the commanders-in-chief in the god race felt the same way. They didn't want to invade for Yale's sake, but for their own lives and the safety of their families. They had no choice but to bow their heads. Then they decided to stay in the god race. Yale was too warlike. His ambition would strike terror into the hearts of the other planes. His aggressiveness made it hard for any plane to feel at ease. No one knew when the Outer Realm God race would destroy them. Submit, destroy 60% of them. Resist, destroy. Regardless of whether they resisted or submitted, the plane would suffer great damage. Under such circumstances, they could only fight back. Of course, they needed someone who could lead them, or someone who could give them hope. Ji Yuan was their hope. Ji Yuan had taken the initiative to attack the God race, causing the God race to suffer heavy losses. They were even on the verge of being destroyed. Under such circumstances, anyone with the slightest bit of courage, they would stand together with Ji Yuan. Moreover, there were still many survivors in those planes whose homes had been destroyed. Even without the support of the other planes, the other survivors would follow Ji Yuan to overthrow the Outerium Protoss and obtain the position of Overlord. They weren't afraid of death. They were only afraid of dying for nothing. Now that Ji Yuan was attacking the God race, it was worth it even if they died for Ji Yuan. They had nothing to lose. They weren't afraid. Even if they died, as long as Ji Yuan destroyed the God race, it would be revenge for them and their dead clansmen. If it didn't succeed for them, this was the most likely chance of success. If they seized this opportunity, they would die without regrets. More than 30 planes, so many people, the commanders-in-chief muttered to himself. He had an idea of the God race commanders-in-chief and warriors from the God race. They were dead for sure. Such a grand alliance wasn't something they could resist at all. Actually, this also reflected the outcome of the God race. The God race was strong. A tiger couldn't stand up to a pack of wolves. The God race didn't have the power to go against the entire world. Not just the God race. No race in any plane had this ability. Perhaps Yale was very powerful. He was so powerful that everyone could only look up to him. No one was his match. He could provoke the entire world without a care. But the god race couldn't do that. Even if Yale won in the end, he would only get a battered god race. By then, the god race would no longer be the god race. Of course, perhaps he would occupy a new plane and establish his hegemony there. That's not all. Ming-Di shrugged. Those are just the planes that came with the Green Rain race. I believe there will be many other planes that will find out. That's not important. The commanders-in-chief smiled sadly. More than 30 planes were enough to worry them, not to mention the involvement of other planes. The god race couldn't return. The god race had no chance of turning the tables. Ji Yuan, they really won this time. Of course, they only won against the gods who had no freedom and couldn't decide their own fate. Yale, I didn't know if they could win. Come. The commanders-in-chief closed his eyes and didn't resist. What? Aren't you going to resist? Just give up? There's no need for a futile struggle. I just hope that if you win, you can leave some gods alive. Many of them are innocent. They don't want to invade and kill. The commanders-in-chief said, Our Master of the Stars will make the decision. But don't worry, our Master of the Stars will definitely not be as cruel as your God King. Chapter 2016. No one had expected the collapse of the Divine Palace will appear in such a result. Yale definitely did not know the predicament his celestial race elites were in right now. He also did not know that the Celestials were in despair and giving up. Perhaps, even if he knew, he wouldn't care. To him, the god race was no different from the other races. At most, the god race was his family. But as long as he could condense a darkness divine spark, he would achieve an extraordinary status. Even if he didn't have a clan behind him, he didn't care. Lonely? If he was afraid of loneliness, he could go and support clan. He was here. No matter what race it would be the second god race. Star-Lord Yi, I've finally seen your true form. How have you been? As the Divine Palace collapsed, Yale, the Five Elements' Great Emperor, and the others ended up in the same area as Yi Zichen. No one would have thought that under such circumstances, the Five Elements' Great Emperor was still greeting Yi Zichen. Bro, can you be more serious? Do you think we can revive and have resurrection tokens while playing games? Yi Zichen was truly speechless. How did such a person become a great emperor? He was even the #1 person in the past era to be able to win the favor of the 2 elders of the Fox clan. Back when he entered the painting world and saw his final meeting with Zhou Wu, he did not look like this. Perhaps, maybe this was his charm. He was about to die, yet he was still in a mood to joke around. Am I not very serious? The Five Elements' Great Emperor was utterly helpless. Seeing him like this, Yi Zichen was truly infuriated. I'm begging you to be serious. Hey, then, can you be more serious? For some reason, the Five Elements' Great Emperor glared at him, speechless. This stone statue should be of the earth element, right? What are you thinking about when you keep hitting it with water elements? Do you want us to all die before you come out? Huh? He was shocked. What's wrong with that? Before Song and had transformed into a colossus, he had said that he was afraid of the water elemental sprites. Only then would Yi Zichen use the water element to hit the stone statue. We both practiced the Tao of the 5 elements. Although you didn't inherit my mantle, the 5 elements of earth, what you comprehended is the 5 elements of heaven and the 5 elements of earth. Don't you know that? Huh? The 5 elements reinforced and restrained each other. As soon as the 5 Elements' Great Emperor finished speaking, he began to think back to the modern realm. 5 elements, earth restrains water? F*CK. I've been tricked. Haha, how interesting. As the Emperor Star's master, you don't even know about the mutual promotion and restraint of the 5 elements. Yet you want to shake my position? Why don't you take your Ji Yuan back now? This Emperor will ask the craftsman to make a good coffin, and then come find you. You don't have to die here. There isn't even a proper coffin. Yale laughed maniacally. Yi Zichen merely rubbed his nose. It was a little embarrassing. He was stunned by Song and the 5 elements of earth, metal, wood, water, fire, and earth reinforced and restrained each other. Only the water element could restrain him. When a man is about to die, his words are kind. It was this ancient saying that made Yi Zichen believe Chun An's bullshit. The water elemental energy of the five elements bombarded the stone statue, but to no avail. Yi Zichen began to wonder if his water elemental energy wasn't strong enough. However, after all, he had perfected the five elements. Of course, compared to the water elemental sprite, there was still a huge gap, but it was not to the extent where it would not have any effect on the stone statue. A broken stone statue, it had trapped him for so long. He was really curious, but he thought that it was because his water elemental energy was not up to par. Fine. If the five elements' great emperor hadn't spoken up, he would still be in the dark. Did Songen really think he was an idiot? That's right. He was right. And Yi Zichen really had been fooled. What counters Earth? Earth counters water. This Songen was just too amazing. Even at a time like this, he was still trying to trick Yi Zichen. He was so capable. Why hadn't he said that fire counters Earth? If he believed him, his stone statue would have lasted even longer. It was all thanks to the Silver Moon Azure Bear's kick. If he hadn't caused the Divine Palace to collapse, the five elements' great emperor and the others would have fallen to the ground. Yi Zichen definitely would have continued bombarding the statue with water elemental energy. He definitely wouldn't have done so forever. As time went on, he'd have to think about it, but he definitely wouldn't understand in a short time. Without any hesitation, Yi Zichen released his star power. Yi Zichen's original plan had been to save his star power to fight Yale. Unfortunately, of the five elements, water and fire were countered by earth. One gave birth to the other. As for wind and lightning, they were of no use at all. Hold on a little longer, shouted Yi Zichen, who knew the root of the problem. When the Yao Emperor and the Silver Moon Azure Bear realized that Yi Zichen was using water to break through the earth, they couldn't help but facepalm. Was this the Emperor's star? He was a muggle. Stupid Star-Lord. The five elements' great emperor couldn't help but shake his head, but he made no move to help Yi Zichen break free. On his way down, he'd studied the stone statue's seal. This kind of seal could only be broken from the inside. No matter how hard the people outside attacked, it wouldn't have any effect. At that moment, he could only hope that Yi Zichen's starlight had an effect. Otherwise, no, it seemed they couldn't hold on much longer. Dong Wang, stop shouting. If you want to, then go ahead. The Yao Emperor glared at him, gathering his strength. Yale Seal was far stronger than he'd imagined. He was using every ounce of energy he had. If he couldn't break it, he couldn't. Go ahead. The five elements' great emperor admitted defeat. He'd seen the Yao Emperor's head bleed as he tried to break the seal. Even now, his body didn't belong to him. It belonged to his little brother-in-law. Although this guy was a Lich King and fairly strong, he was just a magus. His physical body couldn't compare to the Yao Emperor's. Then shut up. Dong. Another fearless charge. Nothing unexpected happened. Still no break. Don't waste your energy. How can this Emperor's seal be broken by you? Let me. At this moment, a deep voice suddenly rang out in the sky. Yi Zichen's clone, the five elements' great emperor, and the Yao Emperor were all stunned. Don't. Unfortunately, they were too slow. By the time they finished speaking, the Silver Moon Ash Bear had already lifted its foot and stomped down on Qinglan. Without the Silver Moon Ash Bear's suppression, bang! Yi Zichen's clone's starlight instantly shattered, and the five elements' great emperor coughed up a mouthful of blood and flew backwards. The Yao Emperor could only wait for the Silver Moon Ash Bear to break the seal so he could snatch away Qinglan's darkness godhead before Yale did. Unfortunately, it still didn't work. I told you weren't smart enough. As expected, you really aren't smart enough. All you have is brute force, but no brains. You can only be someone else's battle pet. When they heard this, the five elements' great emperor and the Yao Emperor's eyes flashed with despair. They stared fixedly at the enormous beast above them.